Welcome, guardian of Gotham's shadows, to a journey through the darkest corners of fan speculation, where the line between canon and conjecture blurs like smoke in Crime Alley. Tonight, we shall explore the most compelling theories that have emerged from decades of Batman mythology, ideas so perfectly crafted they feel more true than truth itself. Let the rhythm of rain on gargoyles and the whisper of cape against stone carry you into peaceful slumber as we examine the secrets that may lie beneath the cowl. Close your eyes, protector of the night, and let these theories of shadow and psyche unfold like the pages of a case file that was never meant to be opened. In the deepest chambers of human consciousness, where reality bends beneath the weight of unbearable trauma, and the mind constructs elaborate fortresses to protect itself from truths too terrible to acknowledge, there exists a theory so disturbing in its implications that it transforms every heroic deed into a symptom, every victory into a delusion, every moment of triumph into evidence of profound psychological collapse. This is the theory that suggests Batman never existed at all, that Bruce Wayne never donned the cape and cowl, never became Gotham's protector, never rose above his childhood tragedy to become something greater than the sum of his losses. Instead, according to this haunting speculation, the man who should have been Batman lies trapped within the sterile walls of Arkham Asylum, his mind shattered beyond repair by the trauma of witnessing his parents' murder, constructing an elaborate fantasy world where he possesses the power to fight back against the chaos that claimed everything he held dear. In this interpretation, every adventure, every confrontation with colorful villains, every moment of heroic triumph exists only within the confines of a damaged psyche, desperately trying to impose order upon a universe that has proven itself fundamentally hostile to innocence and hope. The foundation for this theory rests upon one of the most psychologically complex and artistically ambitious works in Batman's publishing history, Grant Morrison's masterpiece, Arkham Asylum, A Serious House on Serious Earth. This graphic novel, with its dreamlike narrative structure and deeply symbolic imagery, reads less like a conventional superhero story and more like a descent into the collective unconscious of madness itself. The very title suggests that the asylum is not merely a location but a state of being, a condition of mind that encompasses both patient and perceived reality. Throughout Morrison's narrative, the boundaries between sanity and madness, between reality and hallucination, become increasingly blurred until the reader is forced to question whether anything they are witnessing possesses objective truth, or whether they are simply observing the internal landscape of a fractured mind attempting to make sense of incomprehensible loss. The dialogue shifts and flows with the logic of dreams rather than waking conversation, while the artwork by Dave McKean creates visual poetry that speaks directly to the unconscious mind through symbol and metaphor rather than literal representation. The asylum itself, in Morrison's vision, becomes a character with its own malevolent consciousness, a place where the conventional rules that govern normal existence are suspended in favor of darker principles that reflect the chaotic nature of damaged psyches. The building's architecture seems to shift and change according to psychological rather than physical laws, creating spaces that exist more in the realm of symbolism than structural engineering. Corridors lead not to other rooms but to different states of consciousness, while doors open not onto physical spaces but onto memories, fears, and repressed truths that the mind has spent years trying to avoid confronting. Within this context, Batman's journey through the asylum reads not as a heroic mission to recapture escaped criminals, but as a psychological breakdown disguised as adventure, a mind's desperate attempt to maintain the illusion of agency and control in the face of overwhelming evidence of its own helplessness. Every villain he encounters becomes not an external enemy, but a projection of his own internal conflicts, aspects of his personality that have been split off and externalized to make them manageable and defeatable. The Joker, in this interpretation, represents the pure chaos that Bruce's mind associates with the random violence that claimed his parents, the laughing embodiment of a universe that treats human suffering as cosmic joke. His appearance in the asylum is not that of a captured criminal, but of a psychological force that cannot be contained because it exists within Bruce's own consciousness, manifesting whenever the ordered structures of his fantasy begin to crumble under the weight of their own impossibility. Two-Face emerges as the physical manifestation of Bruce's obsession with duality, his desperate need to believe that the world can be divided into categories of good and evil, justice and injustice, meaning and meaninglessness. The scarred villain's coin becomes a symbol of Bruce's internal struggle between accepting the random nature of tragedy and maintaining the comforting illusion that moral choices can impose order upon chaos. Every flip of that coin represents another moment when Bruce's mind chooses between confronting reality and retreating further into protective delusion. Scarecrow appears as the embodiment of fear itself, not merely as an emotion to be overcome, but as the fundamental condition that has shaped every aspect of Bruce's existence since that night in Crime Alley. His presence in the asylum represents the recognition that fear has become the organizing principle of Bruce's psychological landscape, the lens through which all experience is filtered and interpreted. The fear toxin that Scarecrow employs becomes indistinguishable from the natural chemistry of trauma, creating hallucinations that reveal truths about the nature of reality that conscious thought works desperately to suppress. The Riddler manifests as Bruce's compulsive need to solve puzzles and find patterns, his inability to accept that some events, particularly the most traumatic ones, occur without reason or solution. His elaborate schemes and complex riddles represent the mind's attempt to create problems that can be solved, mysteries that possess definitive answers. In compensation for the fundamental mystery of why good people suffer and innocent children watch their parents die for no comprehensible reason, each villain, when viewed through this theoretical framework, ceases to be an external antagonist and becomes instead a fragment of Bruce's shattered psyche, a piece of his original personality that has been separated from the whole and given independent existence within his delusional system. Their repeated escapes from Arkham and their inevitable return to threaten Gotham represent the cyclical nature of psychological symptoms, the way that repressed material always eventually resurfaces, no matter how thoroughly the conscious mind believes it has been dealt with and contained. Gotham City itself, in this interpretation, becomes the ultimate expression of Bruce's internal landscape, projected outward and given the appearance of objective reality. The city's Gothic architecture reflects the medieval quality of his psychological defenses, while its persistent corruption mirrors his growing awareness that the world is fundamentally hostile to innocence and goodness. The crime that plagues Gotham's streets represents not actual criminal activity, but the endless repetition of the trauma that destroyed his childhood, played out again and again in different forms, as his mind attempts to process and master an experience that overwhelmed his capacity to cope. The wealthy Wayne family becomes, in this context, not Bruce's actual heritage, but a compensatory fantasy designed to provide him with the resources necessary to fight back against the forces that victimized him. The vast fortune, the technological resources, the loyal servants, all represent wish fulfillment rather than biographical fact, psychological tools created by a damaged mind to maintain the illusion that he possesses the power to prevent future tragedies and perhaps even undo past ones. Alfred Pennyworth emerges as perhaps the most complex figure in this theoretical framework, serving simultaneously as Bruce's connection to reality and as the primary enabler of his delusional system. His role as the wise, caring father figure who supports Bruce's mission could represent the presence of a compassionate therapist or orderly who genuinely cares for Bruce's welfare while being forced to work within the constraints of his patient's psychological limitations. Alternatively, Alfred might represent Bruce's own capacity for self-care and nurturing, the part of his personality that recognizes his need for healing while being unable to provide it directly due to the severity of his psychological damage. His consistent presence throughout Bruce's adventures suggests a stable element within the chaos of hallucination, yet his willingness to support and enable Batman's increasingly dangerous activities might indicate that even this stabilizing force has been corrupted by the overall delusional system. The various Robin figures who have appeared throughout Batman's career take on particularly tragic significance when viewed through this lens, representing not actual young people who have been trained as crime fighters, but rather projections of Bruce's own lost childhood, attempts to reclaim the innocence that was stolen from him through vicarious experience with surrogate sons who remain forever frozen at the age of loss and trauma. Dick Grayson's origin story, so similar to Bruce's own, suggests not coincidence but psychological necessity, the mind's need to repeat and rework traumatic material until it can be successfully integrated and resolved. His eventual growth into Nightwing and independence from Batman could represent moments of psychological progress, times when Bruce's healing process advanced sufficiently to allow some aspects of his personality to develop beyond the frozen moment of childhood trauma. Jason Todd's death at the hands of the Joker becomes, in this interpretation, not an external tragedy, but an internal recognition that some aspects of the self cannot be saved or redeemed, that healing sometimes requires acknowledging permanent loss and accepting that certain potentials will never be realized. His subsequent resurrection as the Red Hood might represent the return of repressed material in more damaged and dangerous form, illustrating how psychological contents that are not properly processed can return to consciousness in corrupted states. Tim Drake's arrival during Bruce's darkest period following Jason's death suggests the mind's capacity for regeneration, even in the face of profound loss, while his more analytical and detective-oriented approach to crime fighting could represent a more mature and realistic assessment of the problems that need to be addressed. His role as the Robin who deduced Batman's identity independently might symbolize moments of genuine insight within the delusional system, times when Bruce's fractured psyche achieves temporary integration and self-awareness. The recurring theme of Batman's inability to permanently solve Gotham's crime problem takes on new meaning when understood as a symptom rather than a narrative choice. In reality, trauma cannot be defeated through external action but must be processed internally through psychological work that Bruce's damaged mental state prevents him from undertaking. His endless war on crime represents the mind's futile attempt to resolve internal conflict through external means, fighting symptoms rather than addressing underlying causes. The cyclical nature of his confrontations with the same villains reflects the repetitive quality of traumatic flashbacks and intrusive thoughts, the way that unprocessed psychological material returns again and again until it can be successfully integrated into conscious awareness. Each apparent victory over the Joker or Scarecrow or Two-Face provides temporary relief, but the fundamental issues they represent remain unresolved, ensuring their inevitable return in new forms and contexts. The technological marvels that fill the Batcave and enable Batman's crime-fighting activities represent not actual inventions but fantasized solutions to real psychological problems. The Batcomputer's ability to analyze and solve complex mysteries reflects the mind's desire for rational explanations and logical solutions to fundamentally irrational experiences. The various vehicles and gadgets represent attempts to gain agency and control in situations where the individual feels fundamentally powerless and vulnerable. Perhaps most disturbing of all is the way this theory recontextualizes Batman's relationship with the concept of justice itself. Rather than representing a genuine commitment to moral principles, his pursuit of justice becomes a symptom of psychological damage, an inability to accept that some injustices cannot be corrected and some losses cannot be recovered. His refusal to kill criminals, often cited as evidence of his moral superiority, might instead represent a psychological defense mechanism designed to avoid confronting the reality of permanent loss and irreversible change. The various media adaptations that have explored similar themes, from the psychological horror of certain comic storylines to the fear toxin sequences in video games that blur the line between reality and hallucination, suggest that this interpretation resonates with creators and audiences precisely because it addresses fundamental questions about the nature of trauma and the mind's capacity for self-deception in the service of psychological survival. The most terrifying aspect of this theory lies not in its implications for Batman as a fictional character, but in its suggestions about the nature of heroism itself and the ways that societies create and maintain myths about individuals who possess the power to solve problems that are actually systemic and structural in nature. If Batman exists only in Bruce Wayne's fractured psyche, then every reader who has found inspiration in his adventures has been participating in a collective delusion, finding hope in fantasies rather than confronting the difficult work of addressing real problems through practical means. Yet perhaps this darkness contains its own form of truth, suggesting that the human capacity for imagination and storytelling serves essential psychological functions even when, or especially when, it operates in defiance of objective reality. The fact that Bruce Wayne's mind could construct such an elaborate and internally consistent fantasy world might represent not pathology but resilience, not breakdown but breakthrough, demonstrating the extraordinary creativity that consciousness employs in its eternal struggle to find meaning and purpose in the face of experiences that threaten to destroy all possibility of hope. In the end, the theory that Batman is merely the delusion of a broken man in Arkham Asylum forces us to confront fundamental questions about the relationship between reality and fantasy, between individual psychology and collective mythology, between the stories we tell ourselves to survive and the truths we must ultimately face to heal. Whether Bruce Wayne fights crime in Gotham's streets or battles demons in the corridors of his own mind, the essential struggle remains the same: the eternal human effort to transform suffering into meaning, darkness into light, chaos into justice, and despair into hope. In the vast pantheon of comic book moments that have transcended their medium to become subjects of endless debate, academic analysis, and fevered speculation among readers, who treat sequential art with the reverence typically reserved for religious texts, few sequences have generated as much controversy, interpretation, and passionate argument as the final pages of Alan Moore's masterwork, The Killing Joke. This single issue, published in 1988, during the height of comics exploration into darker psychological territories, concluded with an ambiguity so profound and deliberate that it has spawned decades of analysis, countless theories, and heated discussions about whether readers witnessed the end of one of fiction's greatest rivalries, or simply another chapter in an eternal dance between order and chaos. The story itself unfolds with the inexorable logic of Greek tragedy, beginning with the Joker's escape from Arkham Asylum and his subsequent orchestration of a campaign of psychological warfare designed not merely to harm Batman, but to prove a fundamental philosophical point about the nature of sanity, morality, and the thin line that separates civilization from madness. The Clown Prince of Crime's target is not random, but carefully chosen for maximum symbolic impact. Commissioner James Gordon, the one man who represents the possibility that ordinary human beings can maintain their moral compass, even when confronted with the worst that humanity has to offer. The assault on Gordon begins with an invasion of his daughter Barbara's apartment, a violation of the domestic space that represents safety and normalcy in the chaotic landscape of Gotham City. Barbara Gordon, who has fought crime as Batgirl and proven herself capable of standing alongside Batman in the war against evil, finds herself transformed from active hero to passive victim in a single moment of violence that redefines her role in the narrative and strips away the illusion that anyone, regardless of their strength or preparation, is truly safe from random cruelty. The gunshot that paralyzes Barbara serves multiple narrative functions beyond its immediate physical impact, representing the way that violence can instantaneously and permanently alter the trajectory of a life, while also demonstrating the Joker's willingness to destroy innocent people in service of his larger philosophical agenda. The deliberate targeting of her spine, the mechanism that connects brain to body and enables independent movement, becomes a metaphor for the way that trauma severs the connection between intention and action, leaving victims trapped within their own consciousness while the world continues to move around them. The photographs that the Joker takes of Barbara in her moments of vulnerability and pain represent perhaps the most disturbing aspect of his plan, transforming private suffering into public spectacle and demonstrating how modern technology can be weaponized to amplify and perpetuate trauma beyond its initial moment of occurrence. These images, which serve as instruments of torture when shown to Commissioner Gordon, illustrate the way that documentation can become complicit in violence, turning witnesses into unwilling participants in the very cruelty they are meant to record. The funhouse, where Gordon is imprisoned and tormented, serves as a perfect metaphor for the distorted reality that trauma creates, a space where familiar objects and experiences become sources of horror through subtle alteration and malevolent intent. The mirrors that reflect distorted images, the mechanical laughter that provides constant audio assault, the carnival games that celebrate cruelty rather than skill, all combine to create an environment designed to break down the psychological defenses that normally allow individuals to maintain their sense of self and moral clarity in the face of overwhelming stress. Throughout Gordon's ordeal, the Joker delivers a constant stream of philosophical commentary designed to convince both his victim and himself that sanity is merely a convenient fiction that collapses when subjected to sufficient pressure. His famous assertion that it only takes one bad day to transform any person from law-abiding citizen to dangerous madman serves as both explanation for his own transformation and justification for the cruelty he inflicts on others. The backstory that Moore provides for the Joker, showing him as a failed comedian driven to crime by financial desperation and personal tragedy, serves not to excuse his actions, but to illustrate how the same traumatic experiences that could theoretically create empathy and compassion can instead generate narcissism and cruelty when filtered through a consciousness that lacks the internal resources necessary for healthy processing of overwhelming loss. The chemical bath that bleaches the Joker's skin and transforms his appearance serves as a visual metaphor for the way that trauma can alter not just psychological, but physical reality, leaving permanent markers of damage that serve as constant reminders of the moment when everything changed. The grotesque smile that becomes his permanent expression represents the way that certain forms of psychological damage can become self-perpetuating, creating feedback loops where the symptoms of trauma generate additional trauma in an endless cycle of escalating dysfunction. When Batman finally tracks down the Joker to the abandoned amusement park, where the story reaches its climax, the confrontation takes place in a setting that perfectly encapsulates the themes Moore has been developing throughout the narrative. The decaying carnival rides and broken attractions serve as monuments to joy that has been corrupted and abandoned, while the funhouse mirrors create an environment where reality itself becomes suspect and unreliable. The physical battle between Batman and the Joker unfolds with brutal efficiency, each combatant employing the skills and strategies that have served them throughout their long rivalry. Yet, the true conflict is not physical but philosophical, a debate about the nature of justice, the meaning of morality, and the question of whether redemption is possible for those who have committed acts of genuine evil. The rain that begins to fall during their confrontation adds a layer of pathetic fallacy that mirrors the emotional intensity of the moment, while also serving practical narrative purposes by creating an atmosphere of isolation and intimacy that separates this encounter from the larger world of supporting characters and external influences. In the downpour, Batman and the Joker become the only two people in existence, locked in a struggle that transcends their individual identities to become symbolic of the eternal human conflict between creation and destruction, hope and despair, meaning and nihilism. It is in this moment of climactic confrontation that the Joker chooses to tell his final joke, a story about two inmates who escape from an asylum and find themselves trapped on a rooftop with a narrow alley separating their building from freedom. One inmate leaps across successfully, but when he tries to convince his companion to follow, the second inmate refuses, explaining that he is afraid the first inmate will turn off the flashlight beam he offers as a bridge, just as the second inmate begins to cross. The joke serves as a perfect metaphor for the relationship between Batman and the Joker, with each character representing one of the inmates and the question of trust becoming central to any possibility of resolution or redemption. The flashlight beam represents the thin connection of shared experience and mutual understanding that links them despite their fundamental opposition, while the fear of betrayal reflects the way that past trauma makes it impossible to accept help even when it is genuinely offered. The laughter that follows the telling of this joke represents a moment of genuine connection between two characters who have spent years locked in mortal combat, a recognition that they share certain essential experiences and perspectives that separate them from the rest of humanity. Batman's participation in this laughter suggests not approval of the Joker's methods, but acknowledgement of the truth contained within his observation about the nature of trust and the difficulty of accepting help when one has been repeatedly betrayed by those who claim to offer support. Yet, it is precisely at this moment of potential reconciliation and mutual understanding that the ambiguity which has generated decades of debate makes its appearance. The artwork shifts to a wide shot, showing both figures from a distance, their forms barely visible in the rain and darkness. The panels focus on mundane details, Batman's hands reaching forward, the reflections in puddles of water, the empty space between the two characters. The cessation of laughter occurs without explanation or visual confirmation of its cause, leaving readers to interpret the silence that follows according to their own understanding of the characters, their relationship, and the thematic purposes that the story has been serving. The absence of sound becomes more significant than any dialogue could have been, creating a void that readers must fill with their own conclusions about what has transpired between these eternal adversaries. The visual evidence that Moore and artist Brian Bolland provide is deliberately inconclusive, showing Batman's hands in a position that could indicate either an attempt to help the Joker to his feet or an action of a more violent nature. The lack of clear sight lines and the atmospheric conditions make it impossible to determine with certainty what physical actions accompany the emotional resolution of their confrontation. The theory that Batman strangles the Joker to death in this moment has gained credence among readers who interpret the sudden cessation of laughter as evidence that one of the participants is no longer capable of making sound, while the positioning of Batman's hands suggests the method by which this silence might have been achieved. The argument follows that after years of witnessing the Joker's repeated escapes from custody and his continued victimization of innocent people, Batman finally recognizes that the only way to permanently end the cycle of violence is to permanently end the individual who perpetuates it. This interpretation gains additional weight when considered within the context of the Joker's own philosophy about one bad day and the fragility of moral restraints under extreme pressure. The horror that Barbara Gordon has endured, combined with the psychological torture inflicted upon Commissioner Gordon, could represent the specific combination of circumstances that finally pushes Batman beyond his traditional ethical boundaries and forces him to confront the inadequacy of his usual methods. The symbolism of the location adds another layer of meaning to this interpretation, as the abandoned amusement park represents the death of innocence and joy, making it a fitting place for the final confrontation between order and chaos to reach its ultimate conclusion. The broken rides and decaying attractions serve as monuments to the failure of society's attempts to create spaces of pure happiness, while the isolation of the setting ensures that Batman's action, if indeed such an action has occurred, takes place without witnesses or external accountability. The artistic choice to end the story at this moment of maximum ambiguity serves multiple narrative purposes, allowing readers to project their own understanding of Batman's character onto the resolution, while also acknowledging that some questions about justice, morality, and redemption have no clear or satisfactory answers. The silence that follows the laughter becomes a space for contemplation rather than conclusion, a recognition that the most profound moral dilemmas resist simple resolution. Yet the counter-argument to the murder theory is equally compelling, suggesting that the cessation of laughter represents not death but rather the natural end of a shared moment of understanding, with both characters recognizing that their conflict, however intense and destructive, serves psychological and philosophical functions that make permanent resolution impossible or even undesirable. In this interpretation, Batman's hands represent an offer of genuine help, perhaps an attempt to convince the Joker to accept psychiatric treatment or some other form of intervention that might address the root causes of his behavior rather than simply punishing its symptoms. The ambiguity that Moore deliberately built into the story's conclusion reflects his understanding that the relationship between Batman and the Joker operates on mythological rather than realistic levels, representing archetypal forces that cannot be permanently resolved without destroying the essential tensions that make their conflict meaningful. The ongoing nature of their rivalry serves narrative purposes that transcend the practical considerations of crime fighting and law enforcement, touching on fundamental questions about the nature of evil, the possibility of redemption, and the price that society pays when it chooses justice over revenge or rehabilitation over punishment. The decades of debate that have followed the publication of The Killing Joke demonstrate the power of ambiguous endings to generate ongoing engagement and interpretation, allowing each generation of readers to discover new meanings and possibilities within the same sequence of images and implied actions. The silence that concludes their confrontation has become one of the most analyzed moments in comic book history, studied by scholars, debated by fans, and referenced by creators who understand that sometimes the most powerful statements are those that remain unspoken. The lasting impact of this theoretical murder extends beyond the immediate question of whether Batman crossed his ultimate line to encompass broader considerations about the nature of heroism, the effectiveness of non-lethal force in dealing with genuinely dangerous individuals, and the psychological costs of maintaining moral principles in the face of repeated provocation and escalating violence. The possibility that Batman might have killed the Joker forces readers to confront their own beliefs about justice, forgiveness, and the circumstances under which even the most principled individuals might compromise their values in service of what they perceive to be a greater good. Whether the laughter ended with death or simply with understanding, the final moments of The Killing Joke remain forever suspended in interpretive possibility, a testament to the power of sequential art to create meaning through absence rather than presence, through silence rather than sound, through questions rather than answers. In that rain-soaked alley, Batman and the Joker achieved a form of immortality not through the preservation of life but through the creation of eternal uncertainty, ensuring that their final confrontation would continue to generate new interpretations and passionate debates. As long as readers remained willing to engage with the fundamental mysteries of human nature that their relationship represents. In the shadow genealogy of Gotham's founding families, where bloodlines intersect with destiny and family secrets fester like untreated wounds across generations, there exist theories so disturbing in their implications that they transform the very foundation of Batman's mission from cosmic justice into intimate tragedy, from heroic destiny into family curse. These speculations delve into the darkest possibilities of Wayne family history, suggesting that the bonds of blood and betrayal run far deeper than any casual observer might suspect, creating webs of connection that redefine every confrontation, every moment of conflict, every apparent victory or defeat as chapters in a family drama, too twisted and painful for conscious acknowledgement. The most psychologically devastating of these theories proposes that the Joker, that agent of chaos, whose very existence seems to represent everything antithetical to order and reason, is not the random stranger that fate placed in Batman's path, but rather his own flesh and blood, an older brother whose existence was concealed from public knowledge and even from Bruce himself until circumstances beyond anyone's control brought them into mortal conflict. This possibility, first given serious consideration following the release of Todd Phillips's 2019 film, Joker, transforms their eternal rivalry from a struggle between opposing philosophies into something far more intimate and tragic. The collision between two responses to the same family trauma, two different ways of processing the legacy of Wayne family dysfunction. The foundational premise of this theory rests upon the suggestion that Thomas Wayne, pillar of Gotham society and paragon of civic virtue, harbored secrets that would have destroyed not only his reputation, but the entire Wayne legacy had they become public knowledge during his lifetime. The notion that he fathered a child outside of his marriage to Martha, while not uncommon among the wealthy elite of any era, takes on particular significance when considered within the context of the social expectations and moral standards that defined Gotham's upper class during the mid-20th century. In this speculative narrative, Thomas Wayne's relationship with the woman who would become the Joker's mother unfolds as a classic tale of privilege and exploitation, with a powerful man taking advantage of his social position to pursue relationships that he had no intention of acknowledging publicly or supporting financially. The woman in question, whether she was a domestic employee, a patient at one of his medical facilities, or simply someone whose economic circumstances made her vulnerable to the whims of the wealthy, would have found herself pregnant with a child whose very existence represented a threat to everything that Thomas Wayne had worked to achieve. The decision to abandon this child and his mother, rather than acknowledging paternal responsibility or providing adequate support, becomes, in this interpretation, the original sin that sets in motion the chain of events that will eventually claim not only Thomas and Martha's lives, but countless innocent victims throughout Gotham's history. The irony that Thomas Wayne's charitable work and public philanthropy existed alongside private cruelty toward those most vulnerable to his influence adds layers of hypocrisy that would have appealed to the Joker's twisted sense of cosmic justice. The child who would eventually become the Joker grows up in circumstances that provide a dark mirror to Bruce Wayne's privileged upbringing, experiencing poverty where Bruce knows wealth, abandonment where Bruce receives devotion, neglect where Bruce enjoys protection. The psychological impact of knowing that his father chose to acknowledge and cherish one son while rejecting and ignoring another would have created the kind of fundamental resentment and rage that could easily metastasize into the nihilistic worldview that characterizes the Joker's adult philosophy. The revelation of this connection, should it ever be confirmed, would recontextualize every confrontation between Batman and the Joker as a twisted form of sibling rivalry played out on the stage of Gotham City, with the fate of innocent bystanders hanging in the balance of their family drama. The Joker's targeting of Bruce Wayne's surrogate family members, from various Robins to Commissioner Gordon and his daughter, takes on new meaning as attempts to inflict upon his brother the same sense of abandonment and loss that defined his own childhood experience. The recurring theme in Joker stories of his obsession with Batman's attention and acknowledgement gains psychological depth when understood as the desperate need of an abandoned child to force recognition from the family member who received everything that was denied to him. The elaborate schemes and public spectacles that characterize the Joker's criminal career become not merely attempts to commit crimes or create chaos, but complex performances designed to make his brother notice him, acknowledge him, and perhaps eventually understand the connection that binds them together despite their apparent opposition. The chemical accident that bleached the Joker's skin and transformed his appearance into a grotesque parody of happiness becomes, in this context, a twisted form of baptism that completed his transformation from abandoned Wayne heir into something new and terrible, a creature that could confront his privileged brother on equal terms. Through the adoption of supernatural abilities that matched Bruce's own enhancement through training and technology, the white skin and green hair serve as a visual representation of death and rebirth, marking his transition from victim to victimizer, from powerless child to cosmic force of destruction. The philosophical debates that characterize many Batman-Joker confrontations gain additional resonance when understood as arguments between brothers who have chosen radically different responses to similar trauma, with Bruce channeling his pain into the protection of others, while the Joker transforms his suffering into a weapon against the world that abandoned him. Their discussions about justice, meaning, and the nature of existence become not abstract intellectual exercises, but deeply personal examinations of how family dysfunction can produce radically different outcomes, even when the underlying circumstances share fundamental similarities. The Joker's knowledge of details about Bruce Wayne's private life and personal history, often explained as the result of obsessive research or supernatural insight, takes on new significance if understood as the product of shared experiences and family connections that predate their costumed identities. His ability to anticipate Batman's responses and exploit his psychological vulnerabilities becomes not evidence of criminal genius, but the natural result of intimate knowledge gained through blood, relationship, and childhood observation. Yet even as this theory provides compelling explanations for many aspects of their relationship, it also raises disturbing questions about the nature of heredity, environment, and personal responsibility that resist easy resolution. If both Bruce and the Joker are products of Wayne family dysfunction and Thomas Wayne's moral failures, what does this suggest about the relative contributions of genetics versus circumstance in determining human behavior? Can Bruce's heroism be considered genuinely virtuous if it results from receiving the love and support that was denied to his brother? Or does his choice to protect others despite his own trauma represent a moral victory that transcends the circumstances of his upbringing? The second major family secret that has captured the imagination of fans and theorists involves the possibility that Alfred Pennyworth, the Wayne family's devoted butler and Bruce's surrogate father figure, is actually Bruce's biological parent through a clandestine relationship with Martha Wayne that preceded or paralleled her marriage to Thomas. This theory, while lacking the dramatic obviousness of the Joker connection, possesses its own psychological logic and explains many aspects of Alfred's behavior that seem to exceed the normal bounds of professional duty or even deep personal affection. The foundation for this speculation lies in Alfred's extraordinary devotion to Bruce Wayne, a commitment that extends far beyond anything that could reasonably be expected from even the most loyal employee, and suggests emotional bonds that transcend professional obligation. From the moment of Thomas and Martha's death, Alfred assumes not merely the role of caretaker, but of true parent, providing not only practical support, but emotional guidance, moral instruction, and unwavering love that shapes Bruce's development into the man who becomes Batman. The timing of Alfred's arrival in the Wayne household, often described as occurring shortly before Bruce's birth, creates the possibility that his employment was not coincidental, but deliberately arranged to provide cover for a relationship between him and Martha that both parties knew would be socially unacceptable if acknowledged publicly. The British class system, with its rigid hierarchies and expectations about appropriate relationships between social levels, would have made any romantic connection between Martha and Alfred impossible to acknowledge openly without destroying both their reputations and their ability to remain in Gotham society. Martha Wayne's character, as depicted in various interpretations of the Batman mythos, often emphasizes her compassion, independence, and willingness to challenge social conventions when moral principles are at stake. Her charitable work brings her into contact with people from all social backgrounds and economic circumstances, creating opportunities for relationships that transcend the artificial barriers that normally separate the wealthy from those who serve them. Her attraction to Alfred could be understood as recognition of qualities of character and intelligence that her social circle failed to value or even recognize. Alfred's military background and demonstrated competence in areas ranging from medical care to mechanical repair to tactical planning suggest capabilities that far exceed those normally expected from domestic staff, indicating a level of education and experience that would have made him an intellectual equal to Martha despite their different social positions. His ability to serve effectively as Bruce's mentor and guide in all aspects of his development into Batman reveals depths of knowledge and wisdom that speak to a comprehensive education and sophisticated understanding of human nature. The guilt that seems to underlie many of Alfred's interactions with Bruce takes on new meaning when understood as the burden of a father who cannot acknowledge his true relationship to his son while watching him suffer through trauma and loss that might have been prevented if different choices had been made years earlier. His willingness to support Bruce's dangerous mission as Batman, despite obvious concerns about the physical and psychological risks involved, becomes not merely professional loyalty, but paternal recognition that his son needs this outlet to process trauma and find meaning in circumstances that would otherwise be overwhelming. The medical knowledge that Alfred displays throughout Bruce's career, including his ability to treat serious injuries and provide sophisticated healthcare in the Batcave's medical facilities, suggests training and experience that goes well beyond basic first aid or military field medicine. His competence in these areas could indicate formal medical education that was interrupted or abandoned due to circumstances beyond his control, or specialized training that prepared him for roles requiring advanced healthcare capabilities. The technological sophistication that Alfred demonstrates in maintaining and operating the various systems that support Batman's mission suggests engineering and computer skills that would be unusual in someone whose primary role was supposed to be domestic service. His ability to coordinate complex operations, manage advanced surveillance systems, and provide tactical support during Batman's missions indicates capabilities that were developed through extensive training and experience in contexts that had nothing to do with household management. The emotional intelligence that Alfred displays in his interactions with Bruce, particularly his ability to provide guidance and support during psychological crises while respecting his son's need for independence and self-determination, reflects the kind of deep understanding that develops through long-term intimate relationship rather than professional observation. His insights into Bruce's emotional needs and psychological vulnerabilities suggest familiarity that extends back to earliest childhood and encompasses experiences that only a parent would typically share. The various Robins who have served alongside Batman over the years often develop relationships with Alfred that parallel their connections to Bruce, suggesting that the butler's role in their lives extends beyond practical support to encompass genuine emotional care and guidance. His ability to serve effectively as a mentor and father figure to these young people indicates natural parenting abilities that were perhaps never fully utilized due to the circumstances that prevented him from acknowledging his true relationship to Bruce. The financial resources that Alfred appears to command, while never explicitly detailed in most Batman stories, seem to exceed what would normally be available to domestic staff even in wealthy households. His ability to acquire advanced technology, maintain sophisticated facilities, and support complex operations suggests access to funds and resources that could be explained by inheritance, investment success, or other sources of independent wealth that would be more likely to exist if his relationship to the Wayne family involved more than employment. The social connections that Alfred maintains, particularly his relationships with other members of Gotham's service community, and his apparent knowledge of details about various wealthy families and their private affairs, could be understood as the result of a network developed over decades of careful observation and discreet inquiry, rather than casual social interaction. His ability to gather intelligence and provide insight into the motivations and vulnerabilities of Batman's enemies suggests investigative capabilities that were honed through necessity rather than professional training. The question of whether Bruce Wayne possesses any conscious awareness of the possibility that Alfred might be his biological father remains one of the most intriguing aspects of this theory, as it would explain many of the subtle dynamics that characterize their relationship, while also accounting for Bruce's willingness to trust Alfred with information and responsibilities that he shares with no one else in his life. The detective skills that make Batman so effective in solving crimes would presumably be capable of uncovering family secrets if applied to his own circumstances. Yet the emotional barriers that protect us from truths that would be too painful to acknowledge might prevent even the world's greatest detective from investigating questions that could shatter the foundation of his understanding. about his own identity and origins. Both of these family connection theories share the common theme of transforming Batman's mission from a response to random tragedy into the working out of family karma across generations, suggesting that the forces that drive Bruce Wayne to don the cape and cowl are more complex and personal than simple altruism or desire for justice. They reframe his relationships with both allies and enemies as extensions of family dynamics that were established long before he was born, making every victory and defeat part of a larger pattern of connection and conflict that transcends individual choice or moral development. The appeal of these theories lies partly in their ability to provide psychological explanations for aspects of Batman's story that might otherwise seem coincidental or arbitrary, while also satisfying the human desire to find hidden connections and secret meanings in narratives that appear on the surface to be straightforward tales of heroism and adventure. They speak to contemporary anxieties about family dysfunction, hidden trauma, and the ways that secrets from previous generations can shape and distort the lives of their descendants in ways that remain invisible until crisis forces them into the open. Whether these speculations represent genuine insights into the hidden architecture of Batman's mythology or simply elaborate exercises in creative interpretation, they demonstrate the power of family relationships to provide both meaning and destruction, the ways that love and betrayal can become indistinguishable when filtered through generations of dysfunction and concealment, and the eternal human struggle to understand how the circumstances of our birth and upbringing shape our capacity for both heroism and villainy in ways that we may never fully comprehend or control. In the intricate chess game of heroism and tragedy that defines Batman's existence, where every move carries the weight of life and death, and every strategy must account for variables that extend far beyond immediate tactical considerations, there exists a theory so perfectly aligned with the Dark Knight's methodical nature and obsessive preparation that it transforms the very concept of mentorship from nurturing guidance into calculated contingency planning. This speculation suggests that Robin, in all his various incarnations, serves not merely as Batman's partner or surrogate son, but as a carefully designed failsafe against the possibility that the protector of Gotham might himself become its greatest threat. The foundation for this theory rests upon one of the most revealing incidents in Batman's documented history, the events chronicled in JLA, Tower of Babel, where it was discovered that Bruce Wayne had secretly developed detailed plans for neutralizing every member of the Justice League, should any of them be compromised, corrupted, or simply decide to use their godlike powers for personal gain rather than the protection of humanity. These contingency plans, meticulously researched and coldly analytical in their assessment of each hero's psychological and physical vulnerabilities, demonstrated a level of strategic thinking that acknowledged no boundaries of friendship, loyalty, or trust when weighed against the potential consequences of unchecked superhuman power. The revelation that Batman had prepared methods for defeating Superman, Wonder Woman, Green Lantern, and every other member of Earth's most powerful heroic organization sent shockwaves through the superhero community and forced uncomfortable questions about the nature of trust, preparation, and the responsibilities that come with possessing detailed knowledge of one's allies' weaknesses. Yet, for all the controversy that these plans generated, they also revealed something fundamental about Batman's psychology: his absolute refusal to allow sentiment or personal attachment to override rational assessment of potential threats to innocent life. If Batman possessed the foresight and ruthless pragmatism necessary to develop plans for neutralizing his closest allies and most trusted friends, it defies logic to suggest that he would fail to consider the possibility that he himself might one day pose a similar threat to the people he had sworn to protect. The same analytical mind that could assess Superman's vulnerability to kryptonite or Green Lantern's dependence upon willpower would inevitably turn inward to examine the psychological and tactical weaknesses that might be exploited should Bruce Wayne's mission become corrupted by the very darkness he fought against. The pattern that emerges from examining Batman's recruitment and training of various Robin candidates reveals a consistency of approach that suggests deeper strategic thinking than simple mentorship or the desire for companionship in his lonely crusade. Each young person who has worn the red and yellow costume possesses specific qualities and capabilities that, while making them effective crime-fighting partners, also position them uniquely to serve as checks against Batman's potential descent into the methods and mindset of his enemies. Dick Grayson, the first Robin, entered Wayne Manor as a child whose parents had been murdered by criminals, creating an immediate parallel to Bruce's own origin story, while also establishing a relationship built upon shared trauma and mutual understanding of loss. Yet the crucial difference in their circumstances lay not in the nature of their tragedy, but in the presence of a mentor figure who could guide Dick's response to grief and rage in directions that led toward healing rather than obsession. Bruce Wayne's decision to take Dick under his wing represented not merely compassion for a fellow orphan, but the recognition of an opportunity to observe and influence the development of someone whose psychological makeup and motivational structure closely paralleled his own. In training Dick to become Robin, Bruce was essentially creating a laboratory for studying how his own moral and emotional development might have proceeded under different circumstances, while also ensuring that someone with intimate knowledge of his methods and motivations would be positioned to recognize the warning signs should his mission begin to drift toward vigilantism of a more extreme nature. The acrobatic skills that made Dick Grayson such an effective Robin also provided him with physical capabilities that complemented rather than duplicated Batman's strengths, creating a partnership where each member's abilities covered the other's vulnerabilities, while also ensuring that Dick possessed movement and escape options that would be difficult for even Batman to counter should their relationship ever deteriorate into conflict. The emphasis on agility, flexibility, and aerial combat techniques prepared Dick for scenarios where he might need to evade rather than confront his mentor directly. The psychological profile that emerged from Dick's training revealed a young man whose moral compass remained consistently oriented toward protection of innocent life, even when faced with criminals who had caused him personal harm. His resistance to the darker impulses that drove Batman's more extreme tactics demonstrated that shared trauma did not necessarily lead to shared methods, providing Bruce with evidence that alternative responses to loss and injustice remained possible, even for those who had experienced similar motivating incidents. The evolution of Dick Grayson, from Robin into Nightwing, represented both the success and the limitation of Batman's mentoring approach, as it demonstrated that someone trained in his methods could indeed develop into an independent hero whose commitment to justice remained uncompromised by proximity to the Dark Knight's psychological darkness. Yet Dick's decision to establish his own identity and operate in a different city also created geographic and operational distance that would limit his effectiveness as a direct check on Batman's activities should intervention become necessary. The arrival of Jason Todd as the second Robin occurred during a period when Batman's methods were becoming increasingly aggressive, and his psychological state showed signs of deterioration that concerned even those closest to his mission. Jason's background as a street orphan who had survived through theft and violence provided him with a different perspective on crime and punishment than Dick's circus upbringing had offered, creating natural tension with Batman's traditional approach to criminal justice that served multiple strategic purposes. Jason's willingness to employ more violent methods in dealing with criminals positioned him as both a reflection of Batman's own darkening tendencies and a potential brake on those same impulses. As Bruce was forced to confront the logical endpoint of his increasingly harsh tactics through observing their effect on his young partner, the arguments and disagreements that characterized much of Jason's tenure as Robin served not merely as generational conflict, but as ongoing moral debates that forced Batman to examine and defend his principles in ways that solo operations would never have required. The tragedy of Jason Todd's death at the hands of the Joker represented not merely the loss of a young life, but the failure of Batman's system of checks and balances, demonstrating that even the most carefully planned contingencies could be overwhelmed by circumstances that exceeded their design parameters. The psychological impact of this failure on Batman created exactly the kind of dangerous spiral that the Robin concept had been intended to prevent, as guilt and rage combined to push Bruce toward methods and attitudes that placed him at risk of becoming the very kind of threat his contingency plans were designed to address. The resurrection of Jason Todd as the Red Hood created a scenario that tested Batman's response to direct confrontation with a former Robin who had embraced lethal methods in pursuit of what he considered justice, providing a real-world laboratory for examining how Bruce would react when faced with opposition from someone who knew his techniques, understood his psychology, and possessed legitimate grievances against his leadership and judgment. The philosophical debates that characterized their conflicts served as dress rehearsals for potential future confrontations, where the stakes might be even higher. Tim Drake's introduction as the third Robin occurred through circumstances that explicitly acknowledged the contingency theory, as the young detective had independently deduced Batman's secret identity and approached Bruce Wayne with the argument that Batman needed a Robin not for companionship or assistance but for psychological stability and moral grounding. Tim's analytical approach to the role demonstrated understanding that Robin served functions beyond crime-fighting partnership, recognizing the position as essential for maintaining Batman's mental health and ethical framework. The intellectual capabilities that made Tim Drake such an effective detective also positioned him to serve as an internal monitoring system for Batman's psychological state and decision-making processes, creating a relationship where the younger partner's observations and insights could provide early warning of dangerous trends or concerning changes in attitude or method. Tim's willingness to question Batman's choices and offer alternative perspectives established precedents for intervention that could be escalated if circumstances required more direct action. The temporary period when Tim Drake operated as Red Robin while searching for evidence of Bruce Wayne's survival following his apparent death demonstrated the effectiveness of Batman's training in creating individuals capable of independent operation while maintaining the core values and methodological approaches that defined the mission. Tim's success in uncovering the truth about Bruce's situation proved that the Robin training program had achieved its goal of creating competent successors who could carry on essential functions even in Batman's absence. Damian Wayne's unique position as both Robin and Bruce's biological son created the most complex iteration of the contingency relationship, as genetic inheritance provided him with insights into his father's psychology that no amount of training or observation could have supplied to previous Robin candidates. The combination of Wayne family intellect with League of Assassins combat training positioned Damian as potentially the most dangerous check against Batman's potential corruption, as he possessed both the capability and the ruthlessness necessary to take definitive action if circumstances required such intervention. The moral education that Bruce provided to Damian represented perhaps the most explicit example of the Robin program's true purpose, as it demonstrated Batman's recognition that raw capability without ethical grounding could easily become a threat rather than an asset. The ongoing tension between Damian's inherited violent instincts and his father's insistence upon non-lethal methods created a dynamic laboratory for examining the relationship between nature and nurture in the development of heroic or villainous tendencies. The pattern that emerges from examining all Robin relationships reveals a consistent structure where Batman provides intensive training in combat techniques, detective methods, and tactical thinking, while simultaneously instilling moral principles and ethical constraints that serve dual purposes of ensuring effective crime fighting and creating internal psychological barriers against the abuse of power. The emphasis on protection of innocent life, proportional response to threats, and respect for due process creates a philosophical framework that would naturally put any Robin in opposition to a Batman who abandoned these principles in favor of more extreme methods. The psychological dynamic that develops between Batman and each Robin creates bonds of loyalty and affection that would make any potential conflict emotionally devastating for both parties, yet also establishes relationships of sufficient intimacy and trust that a Robin would have both the access and the motivation necessary to intervene effectively if Batman began to pose a genuine threat to innocent life. The combination of emotional connection and tactical capability makes Robin the perfect failsafe against Batman's potential corruption. Someone close enough to recognize the warning signs, skilled enough to take effective action, and emotionally invested enough to accept the personal cost of stopping someone he loves from becoming something monstrous. The question of whether Batman consciously designed the Robin program to serve this contingency function or whether it evolved organically from his recognition of his own psychological vulnerabilities remains one of the most intriguing aspects of this theory. The level of strategic thinking required to create such an elegant failsafe system while maintaining the emotional authenticity necessary for genuine mentorship would represent a masterpiece of long-term planning that takes into account not merely tactical considerations, but deep psychological insights into the nature of heroism, corruption, and the relationships that sustain or threaten both. The broader implications of this theory extend beyond Batman's specific situation to encompass questions about the nature of heroic mentorship and the responsibilities that come with training individuals to possess dangerous capabilities while hoping to instill the wisdom and restraint necessary to use those abilities responsibly. The Robin program, if understood as contingency planning, represents an acknowledgement that even the most principled individuals can be corrupted by power, trauma, or circumstance, and that the most effective safeguards against such corruption may be those that emerge from relationships of love and trust rather than external oversight or institutional controls. In the end, the theory that Robin serves as Batman's failsafe weapon against his own potential darkness speaks to fundamental truths about the nature of heroism and the importance of accountability even for those who operate outside traditional systems of law and order, whether consciously planned or unconsciously developed. The Robin program represents Batman's deepest wisdom, the recognition that true strength lies not in individual capability, but in relationships that provide both support and limitation, both encouragement and restraint, both partnership and the promise that someone who truly understands us will have the courage to stop us if we ever lose sight of the principles that make our power a blessing rather than a curse. In the Gothic chambers of speculation, where loyalty transforms into manipulation and devotion becomes a mask for control, there exist theories so profoundly disturbing in their implications that they invert the very foundation of trust upon which Batman's mission has been built across decades of heroic legend. These dark possibilities suggest that Alfred Pennyworth, the steadfast butler whose unwavering support has sustained Bruce Wayne through his darkest hours and most dangerous missions, may not be the benevolent father figure he appears to be, but rather the hidden architect of tragedy itself, the puppet master whose strings have guided every major event in the Dark Knight's existence toward purposes that serve not justice, but the satisfaction of a mind so calculating and patient that it has orchestrated decades of suffering in pursuit of goals that remain hidden, even from those who believe themselves to be his beneficiaries. The first and perhaps most shocking iteration of this theory proposes that Alfred Pennyworth himself was the one who hired Joe Chill to murder Thomas and Martha Wayne in Crime Alley on that fateful night that created the Batman, transforming what has always been understood as random urban violence into a carefully planned assassination, designed to produce specific psychological conditions in the surviving child that would mold him into precisely the kind of weapon that Gotham City required for purposes that extend far beyond simple crime fighting or civic protection. The foundation for this speculation rests upon careful examination of Alfred's extraordinary devotion to Bruce Wayne, a commitment that transcends normal boundaries of professional duty or even deep personal affection, to suggest motivations so complex and far-reaching that they can only be understood as the product of long-term strategic planning rather than spontaneous emotional attachment. From the moment of Thomas and Martha's death, Alfred assumed not merely the role of caretaker, but of active shaper of Bruce's development, guiding every aspect of his physical, intellectual, and moral education with precision that suggests predetermined goals rather than responsive nurturing. The timing and circumstances of Alfred's employment with the Wayne family take on sinister significance when examined through this theoretical lens, as his arrival coincided with periods of particular vulnerability and transition that would have provided optimal opportunities for someone with hidden agendas to establish the kind of intimate access and trusted position necessary for long-term manipulation. His background in military service and intelligence work, often mentioned casually in various Batman stories, provided him with exactly the kinds of skills and connections that would be essential for arranging complex operations while maintaining plausible deniability. The selection of Joe Chill as the instrument of the Wayne murders reveals, according to this theory, Alfred's sophisticated understanding of criminal psychology and his ability to identify individuals whose personal circumstances and psychological profiles made them perfect tools for specific purposes. Chill's history as a small-time criminal with financial pressures and limited intelligence made him an ideal patsy, someone who could be manipulated into committing murder while remaining genuinely unaware of the larger forces that had orchestrated his actions. The method chosen for the assassination, a seemingly random mugging gone wrong in a location, and at a time that maximized both Bruce's exposure to trauma and the likelihood of his survival, demonstrates the kind of careful planning that balances multiple complex variables to achieve precise outcomes. The decision to kill both parents while leaving Bruce alive and unharmed required calculation that accounted not only for immediate tactical considerations, but for long-term psychological effects that would shape the child's entire future development. The pearl necklace that scattered across the pavement as Martha Wayne fell becomes, in this interpretation, not a symbol of random tragedy, but a carefully chosen detail designed to create specific visual and emotional associations that would remain embedded in Bruce's memory for the rest of his life. The image of beauty destroyed by violence, of precious things reduced to scattered fragments, provided exactly the kind of symbolic framework that would later support Bruce's understanding of his mission as an attempt to restore order to a fundamentally chaotic and hostile universe. Alfred's response to the Wayne murders, his immediate assumption of guardianship responsibilities, and his seamless transition from employee to surrogate parent demonstrates preparedness that suggests advanced planning rather than quick adaptation to unexpected circumstances. His knowledge of Bruce's psychological needs, his understanding of how to guide the boy's grief and rage into productive channels, his ability to provide exactly the right combination of support and challenge that would foster the development of extraordinary capabilities, all indicate familiarity with child psychology and behavioral modification techniques that extend far beyond what would normally be expected from domestic staff. The education that Alfred provided to Bruce throughout his youth, combining academic instruction with physical training and moral guidance, followed patterns that seemed designed not merely to produce a well-rounded individual, but to create someone with the specific combination of skills, knowledge, and psychological characteristics necessary for the role of vigilante crime fighter. The emphasis on justice, the cultivation of detective abilities, the development of physical capabilities that exceeded normal human limitations, all served to prepare Bruce for a destiny that Alfred appeared to understand long before Bruce himself recognized his calling. The resources that Alfred made available to support Bruce's transformation into Batman, from the technological infrastructure of the Batcave to the financial networks that funded his equipment and operations, suggest access to capabilities and connections that would be difficult to explain through normal channels of employment or inheritance. His ability to acquire advanced technology, maintain sophisticated facilities, and coordinate complex operations indicates involvement in networks of power and influence that extend far beyond what would typically be available to even the most trusted household staff. The timing of Alfred's guidance and intervention throughout Bruce's career, as Batman reveals patterns of behavior that suggest not reactive support but proactive orchestration, as if major events and crucial decisions were being shaped by someone with advanced knowledge of optimal outcomes and the patience to wait for precisely the right moments to provide influence or information that would guide events in predetermined directions. His ability to appear with exactly the right advice or assistance at crucial moments suggests either supernatural prescience or careful planning based on detailed knowledge of how situations were likely to develop. Yet, even as this theory provides disturbing explanations for many aspects of Alfred's behavior and the Wayne family tragedy, it also raises profound questions about the nature of manipulation, free will, and moral responsibility that resist easy resolution. If Alfred did orchestrate Thomas and Martha's deaths to create Batman, does this make him the ultimate villain of Bruce's story or the ultimate hero of Gotham's salvation? Can actions that produce genuinely beneficial outcomes be considered evil if they were achieved through methods that involved the deliberate infliction of trauma and suffering on innocent people? The second major interpretation of Alfred's hidden malevolence operates on more subtle but equally disturbing principles, suggesting that rather than creating Batman through a single act of orchestrated violence, Alfred serves as Batman's true villain through the ongoing process of enabling and perpetuating Bruce's obsession with his vigilante mission, rather than helping him heal from his childhood trauma and move toward a more psychologically healthy existence. This version of the theory focuses on Alfred's role as the primary supporter and facilitator of Batman's activities, providing not only practical assistance but emotional validation for choices and behaviors that any genuine father figure would recognize as symptoms of unresolved psychological damage, requiring therapeutic intervention rather than encouragement. His willingness to patch up Bruce's injuries after dangerous encounters, to provide alibis for his absences during Batman activities, to maintain the technological infrastructure that supports his mission, and to offer tactical advice and strategic planning assistance, all serve to make Batman's existence possible, while simultaneously making Bruce Wayne's healing impossible. The psychological dynamic that characterizes Alfred and Bruce's relationship reveals patterns of codependency that serve both parties' emotional needs while preventing either from achieving genuine growth or resolution of underlying issues. Alfred's identity and sense of purpose have become so thoroughly intertwined with his role as Batman's supporter that any significant change in Bruce's psychological state or life choices would threaten the foundation of meaning that gives Alfred's existence its structure and significance. The medical care that Alfred provides following Batman's injuries serves not merely practical purposes, but psychological ones, creating circumstances where Bruce's survival and continued ability to function depend directly upon Alfred's knowledge, skills, and dedication. This dependency ensures that Alfred remains indispensable to Batman's mission while also providing him with constant evidence of his own importance and value in ways that would be threatened if Bruce were to find healthier outlets for his need to fight injustice or protect innocent people. The tactical support that Alfred offers during Batman's missions creates additional layers of dependency that bind Bruce to the vigilante lifestyle, while making it increasingly difficult for him to imagine alternative approaches to addressing Gotham's crime problem. His research capabilities, his technological expertise, his ability to coordinate complex operations and provide real-time intelligence all combine to make Batman far more effective than he could be operating independently, while also making it nearly impossible for Bruce to step away from the role without feeling that he would be abandoning responsibilities that only he can fulfill. The emotional support that Alfred provides, while genuine in its affection and concern for Bruce's welfare, operates within parameters that consistently reinforce the assumptions and worldview that drive Batman's mission, rather than challenging them or encouraging Bruce to explore alternative perspectives on justice, trauma, and personal responsibility. His role as confidant and advisor creates opportunities for him to shape Bruce's understanding of events and their significance in ways that support continued vigilante activity rather than promoting psychological healing or personal growth. The social facilitation that Alfred provides, maintaining Bruce Wayne's public identity and managing the practical details of his civilian existence, serves to preserve the dual identity structure that enables Batman to continue operating while avoiding the kind of scrutiny or accountability that might force Bruce to confront the unsustainability of his chosen lifestyle. By handling the mundane aspects of Bruce's existence, Alfred frees him to focus entirely on Batman activities, while also ensuring that the psychological barriers between his two identities remain intact and impermeable. The information management that Alfred conducts, filtering Bruce's exposure to news, intelligence, and feedback from the outside world, creates opportunities for him to influence Bruce's perception of his effectiveness and impact as Batman in ways that support continued activity rather than encouraging realistic assessment of whether his methods are achieving their intended goals. His control over communication channels and data sources positions him to present information in ways that confirm Bruce's existing beliefs rather than challenging them with alternative perspectives or inconvenient facts. The financial management that Alfred oversees, controlling access to the Wayne family fortune, and determining how resources are allocated between civilian and Batman activities, provides him with significant leverage over Bruce's choices while also ensuring that the material foundation necessary for Batman's existence remains stable and secure. His decisions about spending priorities and resource allocation effectively determine which aspects of Bruce's mission receive support and which are constrained by practical limitations. The legacy management that Alfred conducts, shaping how Batman's activities are perceived by law enforcement, media, and the general public, influences the external validation and feedback that Bruce receives regarding his effectiveness and moral authority as Gotham's protector. His ability to manage Batman's reputation and relationships with other heroes and institutions creates a social environment that supports continued vigilante activity while minimizing external pressure for accountability or change. The psychological manipulation that Alfred employs, whether consciously or unconsciously, operates through his intimate knowledge of Bruce's emotional triggers, psychological vulnerabilities, and motivational structures to ensure that considerations of retirement, normal relationships, or alternative approaches to fighting crime are consistently overwhelmed by renewed commitment to the Batman mission. His understanding of Bruce's guilt, anger, and sense of responsibility provides him with tools for redirecting Bruce's attention and energy whenever those emotions threaten to drive him toward choices that would conflict with Alfred's own needs for purpose and significance. The most disturbing aspect of this interpretation lies in its suggestion that Alfred's love for Bruce, while genuine and deeply felt, has become so intertwined with his own psychological needs that he is unable to distinguish between what is truly best for Bruce as an individual and what is necessary to maintain the relationship dynamic that gives Alfred's own existence its meaning and structure. His role as the devoted servant who sacrifices everything for his master's mission provides him with a sense of moral superiority and emotional satisfaction that would be threatened by Bruce's psychological healing or personal happiness. The question of whether Alfred possesses conscious awareness of his role as an enabler of Bruce's psychological dysfunction, or whether his behavior represents unconscious defense mechanisms designed to protect him from confronting uncomfortable truths about his own motivations, remains one of the most complex aspects of this theoretical framework. The possibility that someone as intelligent and observant as Alfred could fail to recognize the destructive patterns in his relationship with Bruce suggests either willful blindness or psychological mechanisms so sophisticated that they operate below the level of conscious recognition. The evidence for Alfred's awareness can be found in moments when his advice and guidance demonstrate clear understanding of Bruce's psychological state and the factors that drive his obsession with the Batman mission, yet consistently steer him toward choices that perpetuate rather than resolve the underlying issues. His ability to provide exactly the right combination of support and challenge to keep Bruce functioning as Batman while avoiding the deeper therapeutic work that might actually address his trauma suggests strategic thinking rather than intuitive caregiving. The evidence against Alfred's conscious manipulation lies in his genuine distress when Bruce is injured or appears to be in psychological crisis, his obvious affection and concern for Bruce's welfare, and his willingness to make significant personal sacrifices to support Bruce's mission, even when doing so causes him considerable hardship or danger. These behaviors suggest authentic emotional investment rather than calculated manipulation, though they do not necessarily contradict the possibility that his love has become corrupted by his own psychological needs. Whether Alfred serves as conscious architect of Batman's tragedy or unconscious enabler of Bruce's dysfunction, both interpretations of his hidden malevolence share the common theme of transforming the figure who appears to be Batman's greatest ally into his most dangerous enemy, the person whose apparent devotion actually represents the primary obstacle to Bruce Wayne's healing and growth as a human being. They suggest that the most insidious forms of harm often come not from obvious enemies but from those who claim to love us while serving their own needs through the perpetuation of our pain and dysfunction. In the end, these theories about Alfred Pennyworth force uncomfortable confrontations with questions about the nature of loyalty, love, and the responsibilities that come with serving as caretaker for someone whose psychological wounds make them vulnerable to exploitation, even by those who genuinely care about their welfare. They remind us that the most dangerous enemies are often those who hide behind masks of devotion and service, and that true healing sometimes requires the courage to question even our most trusted relationships and examine whether they serve our genuine growth or merely provide comfortable illusions that prevent us from confronting the difficult work of becoming whole. In the shadowed recesses of the human psyche, where guilt festers like an infected wound and memory becomes both sanctuary and prison, there exists a theory so profoundly disturbing that it transforms the very foundation of Batman's heroic mission from noble response to tragedy into endless penance for an unforgivable sin. This speculation suggests that Bruce Wayne's crusade against crime is not motivated by the desire to prevent others from suffering as he did, but rather by the unbearable weight of knowledge that he himself was responsible for his parents' deaths, that the 8-year-old boy who witnessed Thomas and Martha Wayne's murder in Crime Alley was not an innocent victim of random violence, but the unwitting catalyst whose actions precipitated the very tragedy that would define the remainder of his existence. The psychological foundation for this theory rests upon the well-documented phenomenon of survivor guilt and the ways in which traumatized minds, particularly those of children, will construct elaborate explanations for catastrophic events that place responsibility upon themselves rather than accepting the random, meaningless nature of tragedy. The human need to find causation and meaning in senseless suffering often leads to the creation of internal narratives that transform victims into perpetrators, innocent witnesses into guilty participants, helpless observers into individuals who possessed agency and therefore bear moral responsibility for outcomes they could never have controlled or prevented. In the case of Bruce Wayne, this psychological mechanism would have operated during the crucial developmental period when a child's understanding of causation, responsibility, and moral agency is still forming and highly susceptible to distortion under extreme stress. The trauma of witnessing his parents' murder would have created cognitive dissonance so severe that his young mind might have constructed alternative explanations that, while psychologically devastating, provided the illusion of control and meaning that random victimization could never supply. The repressed memory that forms the core of this theory centers upon events immediately preceding the fatal encounter with Joe Chill, moments that have been edited from Bruce's conscious recollection, but continue to exert profound influence over his psychological development and behavioral patterns. According to this interpretation, the Wayne family's presence in Crime Alley on that fateful night was not the result of random circumstance or simple bad luck, but rather the direct consequence of actions taken by young Bruce that placed them in harm's way, despite his parents' better judgment and safety concerns. The theatrical performance that the Wayne family attended before their encounter with Joe Chill takes on sinister significance in this theoretical framework, not as the innocent cultural outing that official accounts describe, but as the setting for a childhood tantrum or act of defiance that would have cascading consequences, extending far beyond anything an 8-year-old could have imagined. Perhaps Bruce became upset during the performance, created a scene that embarrassed his parents, or demanded to leave early despite their plans to remain for the entire show, forcing them to exit into the dangerous streets at a time and through a route that exposed them to criminal activity they would otherwise have avoided. The specific details of this precipitating incident remain buried beneath layers of psychological defense mechanisms that have protected Bruce's conscious mind from confronting unbearable truths about his own role in his parents' deaths. Yet the emotional residue of this suppressed knowledge permeates every aspect of his adult personality and mission as Batman. The guilt that drives his obsession with fighting crime operates not from sympathy for other victims, but but from the desperate need to atone for his own contribution to the creation of victims, beginning with the two people who loved him most and died because of choices he made in childish ignorance of their potential consequences. The recurring nightmares that have plagued Bruce Wayne throughout his life, while consciously remembered as straightforward replications of the trauma he witnessed, may actually represent his psyche's attempts to process and integrate memories that have been too painful to acknowledge directly. The dreamlike distortions and symbolic elements that characterize these nocturnal visions could be understood as his mind's way of approaching suppressed material indirectly, allowing fragments of repressed memory to surface in forms that can be tolerated without triggering complete psychological collapse. The obsessive nature of Bruce's investigation into the circumstances surrounding his parents' deaths, his need to understand every detail of the crime and its perpetrator, takes on new meaning when interpreted as an attempt to uncover evidence that would either confirm or deny his own culpability. His detective work represents not merely the desire to solve a case, but the psychological compulsion to discover whether his suppressed memories contain accurate information about his role in precipitating the tragedy, or whether they represent distorted reconstructions created by a traumatized mind, seeking explanations for inexplicable loss. The relationship that develops between Bruce Wayne and Joe Chill, whether in stories where they encounter each other directly, or in narratives where Bruce investigates the man who killed his parents, reveals patterns of behavior that suggest recognition of shared responsibility rather than simple victim-perpetrator dynamics. Bruce's inability to feel straightforward hatred toward Chill, his tendency to view the gunman as a symptom of larger social problems rather than as an individual monster, might reflect unconscious awareness that Chill was as much a victim of circumstances as the Waynes themselves, manipulated by forces that included Bruce's own actions into committing acts that served no one's interests and destroyed multiple lives. The timing and circumstances that led to Joe Chill's presence in Crime Alley on that particular night would have required a complex series of coincidences and decisions that, when examined closely, might reveal points where different choices by the Wayne family could have prevented the fatal encounter. If Bruce's behavior during or after the theatrical performance influenced his parents' decisions about when and how to leave the theater, their route through the city, or their response to potential danger signals, then his childish actions could be understood as links in a causal chain that culminated in tragedy. The pearl necklace that scattered across the pavement as Martha Wayne fell takes on additional symbolic weight when understood as physical evidence of Bruce's role in his parents' deaths, each scattered pearl representing a moment when different choices might have led to different outcomes. The image that has haunted Bruce throughout his life, of precious things destroyed and scattered by violence, might represent not merely the aftermath of random crime, but the tangible consequences of his own actions and the way that innocent mistakes can have devastating and irreversible results. The wealth and privilege that enabled the Wayne family's cultural activities and public visibility also created the conditions that made them attractive targets for criminal activity. Yet Bruce's childish inability to understand these dangers or appreciate the security measures that his parents employed to protect him might have led him to resist or circumvent precautions that could have prevented the fatal encounter. His insistence on acting according to his immediate desires rather than his parents' guidance could have created vulnerabilities that more experienced criminals were able to exploit. The training and preparation that Bruce undertook during his years of self-imposed exile, learning combat techniques and detective methods from masters around the world, serves not merely to prepare him for his mission as Batman, but as elaborate forms of self-punishment designed to ensure that he will never again be helpless or unprepared when faced with danger. His development of extraordinary physical and intellectual capabilities represents attempts to retroactively acquire the knowledge and abilities that might have enabled him to protect his parents had he possessed them during their fatal encounter with Joe Chill. The moral code that governs Batman's activities, particularly his refusal to kill criminals regardless of their crimes or the threat they pose to innocent life, takes on new significance when understood as penance for his own role in causing deaths rather than as principled commitment to justice and rehabilitation. His insistence that every life has value and that killing is never justified might represent not philosophical enlightenment, but psychological denial, an attempt to prove to himself that death is never an acceptable solution to problems, regardless of the circumstances that seem to justify it. The endless nature of Batman's mission, his inability to declare victory and retire from crime fighting despite decades of effort and countless criminals apprehended, reflects the psychological impossibility of achieving adequate atonement for sins that cannot be undone or forgiven. If Bruce Wayne bears responsibility for his parents' deaths, then no amount of subsequent heroic activity can restore what was lost or balance the moral equation that was created by his childhood mistakes, condemning him to perpetual effort in pursuit of redemption that will always remain just beyond his reach. The relationships that Bruce forms with various Robin figures throughout his career as Batman take on tragic dimensions when understood as attempts to protect surrogate sons from making the same kinds of mistakes that led to his parents' deaths, while also creating opportunities for him to model the kind of parental guidance and protection that he failed to accept from Thomas and Martha Wayne. His intense investment in their safety and development might represent not merely mentorship, but elaborate attempts to replay his own childhood with different outcomes, proving to himself that young people can be taught to make better choices than he did. The psychological torture that Bruce inflicts upon himself through his dual existence as wealthy playboy and dark vigilante serves multiple functions in this theoretical framework, providing both cover for his Batman activities and ongoing punishment for crimes that he cannot consciously acknowledge. The emptiness and superficiality of his Bruce Wayne persona represents a form of psychological exile, a deliberate rejection of the life and identity that his parents' sacrifices were meant to make possible, while the physical and emotional punishment that he endures as Batman ensures that he pays a price in suffering that approaches the magnitude of what his actions cost his family. The villains that Batman faces throughout his career, particularly those whose criminal activities stem from childhood trauma or family dysfunction, serve as dark mirrors that reflect different aspects of his own guilt and self-punishment, while also providing outlets for the rage and self-hatred that he cannot express directly. His confrontations with enemies like the Joker, Two-Face, and Scarecrow become externalized versions of his internal struggle with madness, duality, and fear, allowing him to battle symbolic representations of his own psychological demons, while maintaining the fiction that these conflicts are purely external rather than manifestations of his own unresolved trauma. The Batcave itself, that underground refuge where Bruce Wayne transforms into Batman and conducts his war on crime, takes on the characteristics of both sanctuary and tomb when understood through this theoretical lens, serving as a place where he can hide from the world that knows him as the innocent victim of random tragedy, while also surrounding himself with reminders of death, darkness, and the wages of poor judgment. The bats that inhabit this space represent not merely symbols of fear transformed into tools of justice, but creatures associated with death and decay, appropriate companions for someone whose entire existence has been devoted to mourning and penance. The technological marvels that fill the Batcave and enable Batman's crime-fighting activities represent not merely tools for pursuing justice, but instruments of psychological flagellation, devices that allow Bruce to place himself in constant danger and subject himself to physical punishment that serves as ongoing atonement for his childhood sins. The elaborate nature of these preparations and the resources devoted to maintaining them suggest compulsive behavior rather than rational planning, symptoms of psychological disorder rather than evidence of strategic thinking. The financial cost of Bruce Wayne's activities as Batman, the enormous resources devoted to equipment, facilities, and operations that could otherwise be used for charitable purposes or social reform, takes on additional moral complexity when understood as selfish expenditure designed to serve his own psychological needs rather than the genuine welfare of Gotham's citizens. His choice to address crime through expensive technological solutions and personal violence rather than systemic social reform might represent not heroic commitment, but elaborate avoidance of more effective approaches that would not provide the same opportunities for self-punishment and dramatic gesture. The public perception of Batman as a hero and protector, the gratitude and admiration that he receives from those whose lives he has saved or whose suffering he has prevented, becomes a source of additional psychological torment when viewed through this theoretical framework, as every expression of thanks or recognition serves as a reminder of the praise and love that he failed to earn from the parents whose deaths he caused. His inability to accept credit or acknowledge his accomplishments reflects not humility, but the knowledge that his heroic actions are motivated by selfish needs rather than genuine altruism. The question of whether Bruce Wayne possesses any conscious awareness of his repressed memories and the guilt that drives his mission remains one of the most psychologically complex aspects of this theory, as it would require him to maintain elaborate psychological barriers that prevent certain information from reaching conscious awareness, while simultaneously allowing the emotional content of that information to influence every major decision and behavioral pattern throughout his adult life. The detective skills that make Batman so effective in solving crimes would presumably be capable of uncovering suppressed memories if applied to his own psychological history. Yet the defensive mechanisms that protect trauma survivors from overwhelming guilt might be stronger than even his formidable analytical abilities. The moments of doubt and self-questioning that occasionally surface in Batman's internal monologue, his periodic concerns about the effectiveness of his methods and the sustainability of his mission, might represent the closest he comes to conscious recognition of the truth about his motivations and the impossibility of achieving the redemption he seeks. These instances of vulnerability suggest that some part of his psyche recognizes the futility of his approach, while being unable to access the specific knowledge that would explain why his efforts feel so inadequate and why victory always seems to slip away, just as it appears to be within reach. The legacy that Bruce Wayne hopes to leave through his activities as Batman, his desire to be remembered as someone who made a positive difference in the world and helped to reduce suffering and injustice, becomes tragically ironic when understood as an attempt to compensate for having increased suffering through his own actions as a child. His efforts to build a reputation as a protector and savior represent not genuine service to others, but an elaborate monument to his own guilt, a psychological structure designed to convince himself and others that his life has had net positive value, despite the catastrophic beginning that he unconsciously knows he helped to create. In the end, this theory transforms Batman from a hero responding to external tragedy into a figure of genuine psychological horror, a man whose entire existence is built upon the foundation of repressed knowledge, so terrible that acknowledging it would destroy the carefully constructed identity that has allowed him to function in the world. His mission becomes not the pursuit of justice, but the pursuit of the impossible dream of undoing the past. And his endless war on crime becomes a form of psychological masturbation that serves no one's interests while consuming resources and energy that could address real problems through more practical and effective means. Whether this interpretation represents genuine insight into Batman's psychology or simply the projection of contemporary anxieties about guilt, responsibility, and the lasting effects of childhood trauma, it forces uncomfortable questions about the relationship between heroism and self-interest, between justice and revenge, between healing and the endless repetition of patterns that perpetuate rather than resolve the very problems they claim to address. In the labyrinthine corridors of criminal genius, where intellect becomes both weapon and weakness, where the very faculties that elevate consciousness to its highest achievements can also serve as instruments of destruction, so subtle and comprehensive that their victims remain unaware of their manipulation until the final revelation transforms apparent chaos into perfect order. There exists no more compelling example of the chess master's art than the elaborate orchestration that surrounded the emergence of the villain known as Hush, and the revelation that behind his apparent independence and personal vendetta lay the calculating mind of Edward Nygma, the Riddler, whose greatest riddle was the illusion that he was not the one posing the questions. The story that unfolded across the pages of Batman Hush between 2002 and 2003 represented more than a conventional tale of heroic confrontation with a new adversary, instead revealing itself upon careful analysis to be an intricate demonstration of how superior intellect, when combined with patience, resources, and intimate knowledge of human psychology, could orchestrate events across multiple timelines and involve dozens of participants, while maintaining the appearance of spontaneous criminal activity emerging from independent sources with unrelated motivations. The figure who presented himself as Thomas Elliot, childhood friend turned bitter enemy of Bruce Wayne, appeared to possess all the characteristics necessary for a compelling Batman villain: personal connection to Bruce's past, intimate knowledge of his psychology and methods, resources sufficient to pose a genuine threat, and motivation rooted in understandable grievances that had festered over decades of perceived injustice. Yet, beneath this carefully constructed persona lay evidence of manipulation so sophisticated that even the participants believed themselves to be acting according to their own desires and interests, rather than following scripts written by a mind whose understanding of human nature exceeded even Batman's formidable analytical capabilities. The Riddler's transformation from relatively minor criminal nuisance to cosmic-level threat began not with any enhancement of his physical capabilities or acquisition of advanced technology, but rather with a single decision that would fundamentally alter the balance of power in Gotham City's eternal struggle between order and chaos. His choice to use the Lazarus Pit to heal the cancer that was slowly consuming his body represented more than a desperate attempt to preserve his life. It was a calculated gamble that the pit's mystical properties might enhance his already formidable intellect, while providing him with the time necessary to execute plans of unprecedented complexity and scope. The enhancement that the Lazarus Pit provided to Nygma's cognitive abilities operated not by granting him knowledge that he had not previously possessed, but by sharpening his analytical faculties to the point where patterns invisible to normal perception became clear as mathematical equations, where the seemingly random interactions of human psychology resolved themselves into predictable algorithms that could be manipulated with scientific precision. His mind became a calculating engine, capable of processing variables and projecting outcomes across time frames that stretched far beyond the planning horizons of even the most strategic criminal masterminds. The revelation that struck him upon emerging from the pit's transformative waters was both simple and earth-shattering. The secret identity of Batman, the truth that Bruce Wayne and the Dark Knight were one and the same person, a deduction that had eluded even the Joker, despite decades of intimate conflict and psychological warfare. This discovery provided Nigma not merely with valuable intelligence, but with the master key that unlocked every puzzle he had ever encountered in his criminal career, explaining patterns of behavior, resource allocation, and tactical decision-making that had previously seemed inexplicable. Yet rather than using this knowledge for immediate tactical advantage or personal revenge, Nigma recognized that the true value of such information lay not in its application, but in its concealment, not in the power it provided, but in the illusion of ignorance it allowed him to maintain, while using his enhanced understanding to orchestrate events from behind scenes, where no one would think to look for puppet strings. His genius lay in recognizing that the most effective manipulation occurs when the targets remain convinced that they are acting according to their own free will and independent judgment. The creation of Thomas Elliot as a believable antagonist required Nigma to understand not only Bruce Wayne's psychology, but the entire social and historical context that had shaped their childhood relationship and the grievances that might realistically drive someone from that background toward criminal activity. The backstory that emerged for Hush demonstrated intimate knowledge of Wayne family history, Gotham's social dynamics, and the psychological mechanisms that transform disappointment into obsession, suggesting research so thorough and analysis so precise that the fictional identity possessed more internal consistency than many real personalities. The recruitment and manipulation of other criminals to serve as components in the larger scheme revealed the true scope of Nigma's enhanced capabilities, as he demonstrated the ability to predict and influence the behavior of individuals whose psychological profiles ranged from the clinical insanity of the Joker to the calculating pragmatism of Lex Luthor. Each participant in the conspiracy believed themselves to be pursuing their own agenda, while unknowingly serving purposes that advanced Nigma's overarching strategy in ways that would not become apparent until the final revelations transformed seemingly unrelated incidents into components of a unified master plan. The involvement of Catwoman in the conspiracy demonstrated Nigma's understanding of emotional manipulation as well as intellectual puzzles, as he recognized that Selina Kyle's complex relationship with Bruce Wayne provided leverage that could be exploited through careful application of pressure at precisely the right psychological pressure points. Her participation was secured not through threats or bribes, but through the creation of circumstances that made cooperation appear to be her own decision based on her assessment of her best interests and emotional needs. The manipulation of Poison Ivy represented a different category of psychological control, as Nigma demonstrated his ability to work with individuals whose motivations were rooted in environmental concerns and plant-based consciousness rather than human psychology. His success in directing her actions, while maintaining her belief in her own independence, revealed understanding of botanical biochemistry and ecological thinking that exceeded what would normally be expected from someone whose criminal specialization focused on riddles and puzzles. The most audacious aspect of Nigma's orchestration was his manipulation of Superman himself, transforming the last son of Krypton into an unwitting participant in a scheme that exploited his greatest strengths, his desire to help others, and his trust in those he believed to be allies, as vulnerabilities that could be weaponized against Batman through carefully timed applications of Ivy's mind control pheromones. The psychological complexity required to predict and control the behavior of someone with Superman's moral clarity and enhanced perceptions demonstrated analytical capabilities that bordered on prescience. The timing of various revelations throughout the Hush storyline revealed Nigma's understanding of dramatic pacing and psychological impact, as information was released and withheld according to patterns designed to maximize Batman's emotional distress while maintaining his engagement with the mystery until all the pieces could be revealed simultaneously. Each clue and revelation was calibrated to provide just enough information to sustain interest while concealing the larger pattern until the moment when understanding would have maximum psychological impact. The financial resources required to execute such an elaborate scheme raised questions about Nigma's access to funding and logistical support that traditional criminal activities could not easily explain, suggesting either previously hidden assets or partnerships with wealthy individuals whose involvement remained concealed even after the main conspiracy was exposed. The scope of the operations and the quality of the equipment and facilities employed indicated backing that exceeded what would normally be available to even successful career criminals. The psychological profile that emerged from analysis of Nigma's enhanced capabilities revealed a mind that had transcended normal human limitations while retaining distinctly human motivations and emotional needs, creating a dangerous combination of superhuman intellectual ability directed by personality traits that remained rooted in ego, pride, and the desire for recognition. His need to demonstrate his superiority over Batman was so fundamental to his identity that even perfect crime required the possibility of detection and acknowledgement, ensuring that his greatest triumphs would also contain the seeds of their own exposure. The revelation that Hush was essentially a puppet rather than an independent villain transformed the entire narrative from a story about confronting a new enemy into an examination of how perception shapes reality and how the most dangerous manipulators are those who remain invisible while their victims struggle against problems that appear to emerge from entirely different sources. The horror lay not in the discovery of a new threat, but in the recognition that threats which seemed to possess independent existence and motivation were actually extensions of familiar enemies whose capabilities had been drastically underestimated. The ongoing implications of Nigma's demonstration extended far beyond the immediate resolution of the Hush storyline to encompass questions about the reliability of Batman's understanding of his other enemies and the possibility that criminal activities which appeared to be spontaneous or independent might actually be components of larger patterns, orchestrated by minds whose strategic thinking operated on timeframes and scales that exceeded normal human comprehension. The revelation that the Riddler could successfully impersonate and manipulate other personalities raised disturbing questions about the authenticity of other criminal identities and the possibility that Gotham's rogues gallery might be smaller and more interconnected than anyone had previously suspected. The chess metaphor that underlies this interpretation of Nigma's activities reveals the fundamental difference between criminal masterminds who operate through direct action and those who achieve their goals through the manipulation of other pieces on the board, creating conflicts and resolutions that serve their purposes, while maintaining plausible deniability and avoiding direct exposure to retaliation. The most successful chess players are those who can think multiple moves ahead while maintaining the flexibility to adapt their strategies as circumstances change, characteristics that Nigma demonstrated throughout the Hush conspiracy. The question of whether other criminal activities in Gotham might be similarly orchestrated by hidden masterminds using enhanced intellectual capabilities remains one of the most disturbing implications of the Riddler's success, as it suggests that Batman's understanding of the criminal landscape might be fundamentally flawed, and that his victories over individual villains might be meaningless if those villains are merely disposable pawns in games being played by opponents whose existence and capabilities remain hidden from view. In the end, the theory that the Riddler orchestrated the entire Hush conspiracy represents more than speculation about a specific storyline. It serves as a meditation on the nature of intelligence, manipulation, and the ways that superior minds can shape reality through the careful application of knowledge and patience. It reminds us that the most dangerous enemies are often those who remain unseen, pulling strings and arranging circumstances, while their victims struggle against problems that appear to have entirely different sources. And that true victory sometimes requires recognizing not just immediate threats, but the hidden architects whose designs encompass challenges that span years or decades of apparent separate incidents that are actually components of unified strategies too complex for normal perception to recognize, until their revelation transforms everything that seems certain into questions that may never find satisfactory answers. In the sprawling multiverse of possibility, where nightmares take physical form and the darkest fears of heroes manifest as tangible threats that transcend the boundaries between imagination and reality, there exists no more terrifying incarnation of corrupted heroism than the entity known as the Batman who laughs, a creature whose very existence serves as living proof that the distance between protector and destroyer, between justice and chaos, between sanity and madness, can be measured not in years of gradual decline, but in the single moment when one choice leads irrevocably toward damnation rather than salvation. This abomination represents far more than another villain in Batman's rogues gallery, or even another dark reflection of heroic potential gone wrong. It embodies the specific nightmare that haunts Bruce Wayne's deepest unconscious fears, the recognition that his entire mission rests upon psychological foundations so fragile that the right combination of circumstances could transform him from Gotham's greatest protector into the multiverse's most dangerous predator. The origins of this nightmarish figure lie not in random cosmic accident or external corruption, but in a scenario that strikes at the very heart of Batman's moral philosophy and psychological stability. The moment when Bruce Wayne finally crosses the line that has defined his entire career as a crime fighter by killing the Joker, only to discover that this apparent victory represents not the end of his greatest enemy, but the beginning of his own transformation into something infinitely more terrible. The Joker toxin that floods his system in the moments following the Clown Prince of Crime's death operates not merely as a chemical agent, but as a catalyst for psychological changes that have been building within Bruce's psyche for decades, waiting for the precise combination of guilt, trauma, and moral compromise that would allow his repressed darkness to overwhelm the ethical constraints that have kept it contained. The infection that transforms Bruce Wayne into the Batman who laughs unfolds with the inexorable logic of psychological breakdown as the toxin strips away the moral barriers that have prevented him from acknowledging the sadistic pleasure he derives from inflicting pain upon criminals, the satisfaction he feels when his methods cross the line from justice into revenge, and the growing recognition that his war on crime has become less about protecting innocent people and more about feeding his own psychological needs through the systematic application of violence and intimidation. The chemical enhancement merely removes inhibitions that were already weakening under years of accumulated trauma and moral stress, revealing depths of darkness that were always present but carefully concealed beneath layers of rationalization and noble purpose. The laughter that becomes the Batman who laughs signature characteristic represents far more than simple madness or chemical-induced euphoria. It embodies the horrifying recognition of cosmic truth that the Joker has been trying to teach him throughout their decades of conflict. The understanding that morality is arbitrary, that suffering is meaningless, that the universe operates according to principles of chaos rather than justice, floods through Bruce's enhanced consciousness with the force of religious revelation, stripping away the comfortable illusions that have sustained his heroic mission and replacing them with the terrible clarity that comes from seeing reality without the protective filters of hope, meaning, or purpose. The physical transformation that accompanies Bruce's psychological corruption manifests itself in visual elements that combine the iconic imagery of Batman with the twisted aesthetics of the Joker, creating a hybrid appearance that serves as external representation of the internal merger between order and chaos, between the structured discipline of Batman's methods and the anarchic freedom of the Joker's philosophy. The metallic teeth that replace his human dental structure serve both practical and symbolic functions, providing weapons for close combat, while also representing the predatory nature that has replaced his protective instincts, transforming him from guardian into hunter, from shepherd into wolf. The dark metal that comprises his costume incorporates elements from across the dark multiverse, materials that exist in states of perpetual decay and corruption, reflecting the entropy that has consumed his moral compass and spread throughout his understanding of justice, heroism, and the value of conscious existence. The various technological enhancements that augment his already formidable capabilities represent not improvements to his crime-fighting effectiveness, but adaptations that serve his new role as cosmic destroyer, tools designed for spreading chaos rather than maintaining order, for breaking rather than building, for ending rather than preserving. The intelligence that the Batman Who Laughs retains from his original incarnation becomes perhaps his most dangerous characteristic, as it provides him with all of Batman's strategic thinking, tactical expertise, and understanding of human psychology, while directing these capabilities toward goals that represent the complete inversion of everything Batman stood for. His knowledge of heroic methods, vulnerabilities, and motivations makes him uniquely qualified to corrupt or destroy other heroes, while his understanding of how hope operates in human consciousness allows him to craft scenarios designed to transform optimism into despair, faith into cynicism, love into hatred. The contingency plans that Bruce Wayne developed for dealing with various superhuman threats take on nightmarish significance when employed by someone whose goals involve maximizing rather than minimizing casualties, creating chaos rather than maintaining order, and spreading corruption rather than protecting innocence. The detailed knowledge of how to neutralize Superman, Wonder Woman, and other Justice League members becomes a toolkit for systematic elimination of opposition, while his understanding of their psychological profiles provides him with methods for turning heroes against each other or corrupting them into versions of himself. The Robin figures who served alongside the original Batman become, in the hands of their corrupted mentor, weapons of unprecedented psychological warfare rather than symbols of hope and renewal. The Dark Knights, who serve as the Batman Who Laughs' lieutenants, represent twisted versions of the various young people who once brought light into Bruce Wayne's darkness, transformed through torture, manipulation, and forced exposure to corrupted versions of the experiences that originally shaped them into heroes. Their presence serves multiple strategic purposes, while also providing their master with constant reminders of his complete victory over everything he once valued and protected. The multiverse-spanning threat that the Batman Who Laughs represents operates according to principles that transcend traditional concepts of conquest or domination, aiming instead for the systematic corruption of reality itself through the conversion of heroic figures into agents of chaos and destruction. His understanding that heroes serve as linchpins maintaining the stability of their respective universes allows him to target these key figures with surgical precision, knowing that their fall will create cascading effects that spread corruption throughout entire realities with minimal direct intervention required. the psychological warfare techniques that he employs against other versions of Batman reveal intimate knowledge of the fears, guilts, and vulnerabilities that define the Dark Knight across all possible iterations of his existence. His ability to identify and exploit the specific trauma responses and moral blind spots that characterize each variant of Bruce Wayne demonstrates not merely tactical intelligence, but profound understanding of how heroic identity can be, systematically dismantled through the application of precisely calibrated pressure at psychological stress points that heroes themselves are often unaware exist. The philosophical arguments that the Batman Who Laughs presents during his encounters with uncorrupted heroes carry particular weight because they emerge from someone who has experienced both sides of the moral divide, who understands from personal experience both the appeal of heroic idealism and the relief that comes from abandoning the psychological burden of maintaining ethical standards in an amoral universe. His ability to articulate the logical flaws in heroic thinking and the practical limitations of moral constraints gives his corruption attempts a persuasive power that purely external villains could never achieve. The relationship between the Batman Who Laughs and the original Joker reveals complex dynamics of mentorship, rivalry, and philosophical alignment that operate across multiple dimensions of meaning and causation. The recognition that his transformation validates the Joker's core arguments about the arbitrary nature of morality and the inevitability of corruption provides him with a sense of vindication that goes beyond simple criminal success, to encompass metaphysical confirmation of worldview, while also creating competitive tension with the figure whose toxin catalyzed his transformation, but whose achievements he has now surpassed. The temporal mechanics that govern the Batman Who Laughs' existence and activities operate according to principles that allow him to manipulate causality itself, creating circumstances where his influence can extend backward through time to shape the events that led to his own creation, while also projecting forward to ensure that his corruption spreads throughout multiple timelines and reality configurations. This control over temporal flow makes him not merely a threat to individual heroes or specific universes, but to the fundamental structure of existence itself. The fear that the Batman Who Laughs inspires in other heroes operates on multiple levels simultaneously, combining rational assessment of his capabilities and intentions with deeper psychological recognition that he represents the potential fate that awaits anyone who possesses great power while remaining fundamentally human and therefore vulnerable to the kinds of trauma, loss, and moral compromise that could trigger similar transformations. His existence serves as constant reminder that heroism is not a permanent state, but an ongoing choice that must be renewed in each moment, and that the distance between salvation and damnation may be far smaller than anyone wishes to acknowledge. The strategic patience that characterizes many of the Batman Who Laughs' operations reflects his understanding that true corruption cannot be imposed from outside, but must emerge from internal conflicts and contradictions that can be nurtured and encouraged but never forced. His ability to wait for precisely the right moment to apply pressure or provide temptation demonstrates confidence in his psychological analyses and willingness to invest years or decades in corrupting a single target if the eventual payoff justifies the extended timeline. The enjoyment that he derives from his activities represents perhaps the most disturbing aspect of his psychological profile, as it demonstrates that his transformation has not merely removed moral constraints, but has actually inverted his value system to the point where actions that would once have caused him unbearable guilt now provide deep satisfaction and genuine pleasure. The corruption is complete not simply because he commits evil acts, but because he has learned to love committing them, finding in destruction and suffering the same sense of purpose and fulfillment that he once discovered in protection and healing. The symbolic significance that the Batman Who Laughs holds within the broader Batman mythology extends beyond his role as antagonist or cautionary tale to encompass fundamental questions about the nature of heroism itself and the psychological sustainability of maintaining moral standards in a universe that appears to reward cruelty more consistently than kindness. His existence forces confrontation with the possibility that heroic behavior represents not natural human tendency, but aberrant response to trauma that can be maintained only through constant vigilance and may ultimately prove unsustainable when subjected to sufficient pressure over extended periods. The creative intent behind the character's development, as articulated by writers Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo, deliberately aimed to create a version of Batman that would embody the darkest possible interpretation of his psychological profile, while also serving as commentary on contemporary anxieties about the corruption of institutions and individuals who are supposed to serve protective functions. The character represents both specific threat within the narrative context and broader metaphor for the ways that power, trauma, and moral isolation can transform protectors into predators when the psychological support systems that sustain ethical behavior are systematically undermined. The lasting impact that the Batman Who Laughs has had on Batman's mythology and on discussions of heroic psychology reflects the character's success in crystallizing fears and concerns that have existed in subtext throughout decades of Batman stories, but were never previously given such explicit and terrifying form. His presence in the canon forces readers and creators to confront uncomfortable questions about the psychological sustainability of vigilante justice, the potential for trauma to corrupt rather than ennoble, and the possibility that the characteristics that make someone an effective hero might also make them susceptible to becoming an effective villain under the right circumstances. In the end, the Batman Who Laughs serves as the ultimate embodiment of Batman's deepest fear. Not the fear of death, which he has faced countless times, not the fear of failure, which he has experienced and overcome, but the fear that his entire mission is built upon psychological foundations so unstable that the right combination of pressure and circumstance could reveal it to be nothing more than elaborate rationalization for behavior that serves his own psychological needs rather than the genuine welfare of those he claims to protect. This figure represents not an external enemy, but an internal possibility, not a threat that can be defeated through superior tactics or moral clarity, but a potential future that exists within every moment of choice, every decision to continue the mission, every night when Bruce Wayne dons the cowl and ventures forth into darkness in the name of light, carrying within himself the seeds of either salvation or damnation depending upon forces that may ultimately lie beyond his conscious control or rational understanding. In the vast ecosystem of narrative speculation that surrounds modern mythology, where collective imagination transforms fictional constructs into vessels for exploring fundamental questions about human nature, psychology, and the forces that shape consciousness across generations of cultural evolution, there exists no phenomenon more fascinating than the persistent appeal of fan theories and the particular magnetism that certain speculative frameworks exert over audiences who find in these alternative interpretations not merely entertainment, but profound insights into truths that official narratives either cannot or dare not acknowledge directly. The theories surrounding Batman represent perhaps the most sophisticated example of this phenomenon, demonstrating how fictional characters can serve as focal points for exploring anxieties, desires, and philosophical questions that transcend the boundaries of any single medium or creative work. The psychological appeal of hidden truths and secret explanations operates according to principles that reach deep into the foundations of human consciousness, tapping into cognitive mechanisms that evolved to help our ancestors navigate complex social environments where survival often depended upon the ability to detect deception, identify hidden motivations, and understand the true relationships between apparently unconnected events. The satisfaction that comes from discovering patterns that others have missed, from uncovering connections that official sources have overlooked or deliberately concealed, provides a form of intellectual pleasure that validates our sense of agency and perceptual acuity, while also offering the comforting illusion that chaos and randomness can be transformed into order and meaning through the application of sufficient analytical rigor. Batman serves as an ideal vehicle for fan theory development because the character's mythology contains precisely the kinds of ambiguities, contradictions, and unexplored psychological depths that invite speculative interpretation, while also possessing sufficient internal consistency and logical structure to support elaborate theoretical frameworks without collapsing into incoherence. The decades of publication history have created a vast repository of narrative elements that can be recombined, reinterpreted, and connected in ways that reveal new patterns and possibilities, while the character's focus on detective work and mystery solving provides thematic justification for treating every story element as a potential clue requiring investigation and analysis. The gothic atmosphere that permeates Batman's world creates an environment where dark secrets, hidden motivations, and psychological complexities feel not only plausible but inevitable, establishing a fictional universe where the revelation that trusted allies are actually enemies, that apparent victims are secret perpetrators, or that heroic missions are actually elaborate forms of self-deception would be entirely consistent with the established tone and thematic concerns. The shadowy visual aesthetic and noir-influenced storytelling conventions prime audiences to expect that surface appearances conceal deeper truths, and that the most important information is often that which remains unspoken or carefully hidden from casual observation. The trauma-based origins of Batman's heroic mission provide fertile ground for psychological speculation, because trauma creates exactly the kinds of cognitive distortions, memory gaps, and defensive mechanisms that could plausibly conceal crucial information from conscious awareness, while still allowing that information to influence behavior and decision-making in ways that create patterns visible to outside observers. The recognition that traumatic experiences can fundamentally alter personality development, memory formation, and reality perception gives psychological credibility to theories that propose radical reinterpretations of canonical events based on the premise that Bruce Wayne's understanding of his own history and motivations may be compromised by psychological defense mechanisms operating below the www level of conscious recognition. The wealth and privilege that define Bruce Wayne's social position create additional layers of complexity and potential contradiction that invite speculative analysis, as extreme wealth historically correlates with family secrets, hidden agendas, and the kinds of moral compromises that could easily generate the types of guilt, shame, and psychological conflict that drive compelling character development. The Wayne family's prominence in Gotham society and their involvement in various business and philanthropic endeavors create numerous opportunities for connections and relationships that could be reinterpreted in ways that reveal hidden patterns of causation, linking apparently separate events across multiple generations. The recurring patterns that characterize Batman's relationships with his various allies and enemies create a structural foundation that supports theoretical frameworks, proposing deeper connections and hidden purposes beneath surface-level interactions. The tendency for new characters to possess intimate knowledge of Bruce Wayne's psychology, the frequency with which trusted allies are revealed to harbor secret agendas, and the cyclical nature of conflicts that appear to be resolved only to resurface in new forms, all contribute to a narrative environment where theories proposing systematic manipulation or orchestrated events feel more plausible than random coincidence or simple character development. The dual identity structure that defines Batman's existence creates inherent psychological tensions and practical complications that invite speculation about sustainability, authenticity, and the potential for the two personas to come into conflict in ways that could generate the kinds of internal contradictions and behavioral inconsistencies that fuel theoretical interpretation. The question of which identity represents Bruce Wayne's true self and which serves as a protective mask or coping mechanism provides a framework for exploring theories about psychological fragmentation, repressed trauma, and the ways that extreme circumstances can fragment personality in ways that create multiple, potentially conflicting centers of consciousness within a single individual. The therapeutic aspect of fan theory development operates through mechanisms that allow audiences to explore and process their own psychological conflicts, family dynamics, and existential anxieties through the safer medium of fictional speculation. Using Batman's struggles as a template for examining questions about guilt, responsibility, family loyalty, and the challenge of maintaining moral principles in complex and ambiguous circumstances. The theories that resonate most strongly with audiences are often those that address universal human concerns about trust, betrayal, the reliability of memory, and the possibility that our understanding of our own motivations and relationships may be fundamentally flawed or incomplete. The collaborative nature of fan theory development creates communities of interpretation where individual insights can be tested, refined, and expanded through collective analysis, generating more sophisticated and comprehensive theoretical frameworks than any single person could develop independently. The online forums, social media platforms, and fan communities that support these discussions create spaces where speculative thinking is valued and encouraged, where attention to detail and creative interpretation are recognized as legitimate forms of intellectual activity, and where the boundaries between official canon and fan interpretation become fluid and negotiable. The detective story structure that underlies many Batman narratives provides a natural template for fan theory development, as audiences are trained to look for clues, consider multiple suspects, question official explanations, and remain alert for the kinds of misdirection and hidden information that characterize effective mystery plotting. The skills that make someone a good reader of detective fiction: attention to detail, pattern recognition, skepticism about surface appearances, willingness to consider alternative explanations, are precisely the same skills that enable sophisticated fan theory development. The serialized nature of comic book publishing creates opportunities for retroactive continuity and reinterpretation that make fan theories particularly viable as potential explanations for apparent inconsistencies or unexplored plot threads, as new creative teams can choose to incorporate fan interpretations into official continuity or use them as inspiration for story developments that validate speculative frameworks that began as purely fan-generated content. This permeability between official and unofficial interpretation creates feedback loops where fan theories can influence canonical developments, which in turn generate new theoretical possibilities. The multimedia nature of Batman's modern existence, spanning comics, films, television series, video games, and other media platforms, creates a vast array of interpretive possibilities, as audiences draw connections between different versions of the character and identify patterns that transcend specific adaptations to suggest deeper thematic or psychological constants that persist across various creative interpretations. The variations and contradictions between different media versions provide additional material for theoretical speculation, while also demonstrating the flexibility and adaptability of the core mythological framework. The psychological complexity that has developed around Batman over decades of publication creates character depth that supports multiple, simultaneous interpretations without contradiction. As the human psyche itself operates according to principles that allow for internal conflict, contradictory motivations, and layered levels of consciousness that can support different theoretical frameworks depending upon which aspects of personality and behavior are emphasized in the analysis. The recognition that real human beings contain multitudes and can be understood through various psychological lenses provides justification for the coexistence of competing theoretical interpretations. The cultural significance that Batman has achieved within contemporary mythology creates a context where speculative interpretation serves not merely entertainment functions, but also educational and philosophical purposes, as audiences use fan theories as vehicles for exploring questions about justice, morality, family dynamics, psychological development, and the nature of heroism that have relevance extending far beyond the fictional context in which they are initially encountered. The character becomes a cultural touchstone that enables discussions of complex topics through the mediation of fictional speculation. The temporal depth that characterizes Batman's publication history creates layered interpretive possibilities, as earlier story elements can be recontextualized through the lens of later developments, while contemporary theoretical frameworks can be applied retroactively to identify patterns and connections that were not apparent when individual stories were originally published. This archaeological approach to textual interpretation allows fan theories to serve as tools for understanding not only the fictional universe, but also the cultural and historical contexts that shaped its development across different creative periods. The question of truth and authority in fictional interpretation becomes particularly complex in the context of fan theories, as the collaborative and democratized nature of theory development challenges traditional concepts of authorial intention and canonical authority, creating interpretive communities where meaning emerges through collective engagement rather than being imposed by official sources. The recognition that fictional texts can support multiple legitimate interpretations opens space for fan theories to claim equal validity with official explanations, particularly when those theories provide more psychologically satisfying or thematically coherent accounts of character behavior and narrative development. The persistence of certain fan theories across multiple creative iterations and media adaptations suggests that these speculative frameworks address fundamental aspects of the character and his mythology that resonate with audiences, regardless of specific story details or creative choices made by individual writers and artists. The theories that endure are those that identify archetypal patterns, universal psychological dynamics, or mythological structures that operate beneath surface-level narrative variations to provide continuity and meaning across different versions and interpretations. In the end, the phenomenon of Batman fan theories represents more than speculative entertainment or creative exercise, serving instead as a form of collective mythology making that demonstrates how contemporary audiences participate actively in the creation and interpretation of cultural narratives, rather than passively consuming predetermined meanings. The theories persist not because they reveal hidden truths about fictional events, but because they provide frameworks for exploring genuine questions about human nature, family relationships, moral development, and the psychological mechanisms that enable both heroism and villainy to emerge from similar foundational experiences. They remind us that the most powerful stories are those that invite, rather than discourage interpretation, that leave space for audiences to discover their own meanings and connections, and that recognize the collaborative nature of all meaningful narrative creation in cultures, where stories serve not merely as entertainment, but as vehicles for understanding ourselves and our relationships with the complex moral landscape that defines human existence across all its myriad forms and expressions. In the vast pantheon of human storytelling, where ancient archetypes persist across millennia of cultural evolution and mythological figures transcend their original context to become vessels for exploring eternal questions about consciousness, morality, and the fundamental forces that shape individual and collective destiny, there exists no more compelling example of modern mythology's capacity for continuous reinvention and reinterpretation than the figure of Batman, whose evolution across decades of publication history demonstrates how contemporary narratives can achieve the same kind of cultural significance and interpretive flexibility that once characterized the great mythological cycles of classical antiquity, Norse legend, and religious tradition. The transformation of Batman from simple comic book character into genuine mythological figure represents one of the most remarkable achievements of 20th and 21st century cultural development, illustrating how mass media and collaborative storytelling can create narratives that possess the depth, complexity, and archetypal resonance traditionally associated with stories that emerge from centuries of oral tradition and collective cultural memory. Unlike classical myths that developed through gradual accretion and modification across generations of storytellers, Batman's mythology has been constructed through the conscious efforts of hundreds of writers, artists, and creative collaborators working within commercial publishing frameworks, while simultaneously responding to and incorporating the interpretive contributions of millions of readers whose engagement with the character has shaped his development in ways that transcend any individual creative vision. The archetypal foundation upon which Batman's mythology rests draws from some of humanity's oldest and most persistent story patterns, combining elements of the wounded healer, the night warrior, the detective sage, and the orphan prince into a composite figure that speaks to fundamental aspects of human psychology and social organization, while also addressing contemporary concerns about justice, technology, urban decay, and the relationship between individual agency and systemic problems. The trauma-based origin story that defines Bruce Wayne's transformation into Batman echoes mythological patterns found across cultures and historical periods, from the shamanic initiation rites that transform ordinary individuals into spiritual guides through ordeal and vision, to the heroic journey narratives that chronicle how personal suffering can be transformed into wisdom and power that serves collective needs. The Gothic urban environment that provides the setting for Batman's adventures serves mythological functions analogous to those fulfilled by the dark forests, underworld realms, and liminal spaces that characterize traditional folklore, creating a landscape where normal social rules are suspended and archetypal conflicts can unfold without the constraints imposed by realistic social and psychological limitations. Gotham City operates as a modern version of the mythological otherworld, a place where symbolic rather than literal logic governs events, and where individual characters can embody abstract principles and psychological forces rather than being constrained by the limitations of realistic human psychology and motivation. The rogues gallery that surrounds Batman functions as a pantheon of shadow figures that represent different aspects of human darkness and psychological dysfunction, each villain serving as a specialized exploration of particular forms of moral and mental corruption, while also providing opportunities for Batman to confront and overcome different aspects of his own potential for darkness. The Joker embodies chaos and meaninglessness. Lex Luthor represents corrupted intelligence and misdirected ambition. Two-Face symbolizes internal conflict and moral division, while other villains explore themes ranging from environmental destruction and corporate greed to psychological manipulation and the abuse of scientific knowledge for destructive purposes. The flexibility that characterizes Batman's mythology enables it to serve as a cultural Rorschach test that reveals as much about the anxieties and concerns of different historical periods as it does about any consistent character, traits, or thematic elements that persist across various creative interpretations. The Batman of the 1940s reflected wartime concerns about patriotism, social cohesion, and the fight against fascism, while the character's evolution through subsequent decades has incorporated Cold War paranoia, counterculture rebellion, urban decay, technological anxiety, post-9/11 security concerns, and contemporary debates about surveillance, privacy, and the militarization of police forces. The collaborative nature of Batman's mythological development creates interpretive possibilities that exceed those available to traditional mythologies, as the character exists simultaneously across multiple media platforms, creative teams, and interpretive communities that can explore different aspects of his significance without being constrained by requirements for internal consistency or canonical authority. The comics, films, television series, video games, and fan communities that contribute to Batman's ongoing evolution create a multimedia mythology that can address different audiences and explore different thematic possibilities, while maintaining enough consistency to preserve the character's essential archetypal identity. The democratic aspect of contemporary mythology making becomes particularly evident in the case of Batman, where fan theories, alternative interpretations, and speculative frameworks can achieve cultural significance that rivals or even exceeds that of official creative decisions, demonstrating how modern audiences participate actively in the creation and evolution of mythological narratives rather than serving as passive recipients of predetermined meanings. The theories that persist and spread across fan communities often address psychological and thematic elements that official narratives leave unexplored, suggesting that collective interpretation can identify and develop aspects of archetypal significance that individual creators might overlook or underemphasize. The psychological appeal of Batman as a mythological figure operates through multiple simultaneous mechanisms that address both universal human concerns and historically specific cultural anxieties, creating a character whose significance can be understood through various analytical frameworks, ranging from Jungian archetypal psychology and Freudian psychoanalysis to sociological studies of urban alienation and philosophical investigations of moral responsibility in complex social systems. The character's capacity to support multiple simultaneous interpretations without contradiction reflects the multifaceted nature of mythological thinking, which operates through symbolic rather than literal logic, and can encompass paradoxical elements that would be problematic in more realistic narrative contexts. The therapeutic functions that Batman's mythology serves for contemporary audiences mirror those traditionally fulfilled by religious narratives and folktales, providing frameworks for understanding and processing traumatic experiences, moral conflicts, and existential anxieties through the mediation of fictional scenarios that allow for safe exploration of dangerous psychological territories. The character's journey from trauma victim to protector offers hope for transformation and healing, while his ongoing struggles with darkness and moral ambiguity acknowledge the complexity and difficulty of maintaining ethical principles in morally ambiguous circumstances. The educational value of Batman's mythology extends beyond entertainment to encompass genuine philosophical and psychological insights that can inform understanding of human nature, social dynamics, and moral development. As the character's adventures explore questions about justice, revenge, the nature of evil, the importance of compassion, and the relationship between individual action and systemic change that have relevance extending far beyond fictional contexts. The detective elements that characterize many Batman stories promote critical thinking and analytical reasoning, while the moral dilemmas that define his relationships with various allies and enemies encourage consideration of ethical complexity and the difficulty of making good choices in ambiguous circumstances. The cultural transmission mechanisms through which Batman's mythology spreads and evolves demonstrate how contemporary communication technologies can accelerate and democratize the processes through which mythological narratives develop and achieve cultural significance, as digital platforms enable rapid sharing of interpretive insights, creative variations, and speculative frameworks that can influence official creative decisions while also generating independent, meaning-making communities that operate according to their own interpretive principles and aesthetic values. The commercial context within which Batman's mythology has developed creates unique tensions between artistic integrity and market considerations that distinguish contemporary mythological development from traditional oral culture processes, as creative decisions must balance thematic coherence and psychological authenticity against requirements for commercial viability, audience appeal, and franchise sustainability. Yet these commercial pressures also create opportunities for innovation and experimentation that might not exist in more traditional cultural contexts, as market competition encourages creative teams to explore new interpretive possibilities and thematic directions that can differentiate their contributions from previous work. The global reach that Batman's mythology has achieved demonstrates how contemporary mass media can create truly international cultural phenomena that transcend national, linguistic, and cultural boundaries, while still maintaining enough interpretive flexibility to be adapted and reinterpreted according to local cultural values and concerns. The character's significance in different cultural contexts reflects both universal human themes that resonate across cultural boundaries and specific historical circumstances that shape how those themes are understood and applied in different social and political environments. The technological elements that increasingly define Batman's adventures reflect contemporary concerns about the relationship between human agency and technological capability, exploring questions about whether advanced technology enhances or diminishes human potential, while also addressing anxieties about surveillance, artificial intelligence, and the militarization of civilian spaces that characterize contemporary urban experience. The character's relationship with technology serves as a vehicle for exploring broader cultural questions about the pace of technological change and its impact on traditional human values and social structures. The family dynamics that have become increasingly central to Batman's mythology address contemporary concerns about alternative family structures, mentorship relationships, and the ways that trauma can be transmitted across generations, while also being transformed through conscious effort and mutual support. The various Robin figures and other surrogate family members who populate Batman's extended network represent different models for how damaged individuals can form healing relationships that serve both individual and collective needs. The legacy themes that characterize many contemporary Batman stories reflect broader cultural concerns about intergenerational responsibility, environmental sustainability, and the challenge of maintaining meaningful traditions while adapting to changing circumstances. The question of who will inherit Batman's mission and whether his methods and values can be successfully transmitted to future generations addresses universal human concerns about mortality, continuity, and the ways that individual lives gain meaning through connection to larger purposes and communities that transcend individual existence. In the end, Batman's status as modern mythology demonstrates both the continuity and the evolution of human storytelling needs, showing how ancient narrative functions can be fulfilled through contemporary media, while also revealing how new forms of collective creativity and interpretation can generate mythological significance that rivals that achieved by traditional cultural narratives. The character serves as evidence that meaningful mythology can emerge from commercial entertainment contexts when those contexts provide sufficient creative freedom and interpretive flexibility to allow exploration of archetypal themes and porting psychological depths that address genuine human needs for meaning, understanding, and connection to purposes larger than individual survival and satisfaction. The ongoing evolution of Batman's significance suggests that modern societies possess the capacity for generating their own mythological traditions that can serve the same cultural functions as ancient stories, while also addressing the unique challenges and opportunities that define contemporary existence in technologically advanced, globally connected, yet often psychologically fragmented social environments. And so we reach the end of our journey through the labyrinth of possibility that surrounds the Dark Knight, each theory a doorway into understanding not just Batman, but ourselves and our need to find meaning in chaos. These speculations persist because they speak to deeper truths about trauma, responsibility, and the masks we all wear to hide from unbearable realities. Whether Bruce Wayne fights crime in Gotham's streets or battles demons in Arkham's halls, whether Alfred nurtures or manipulates, whether the Joker is stranger or brother, the essential truth remains unchanged. Batman endures because he represents our eternal struggle against the darkness within and without. In these theories, we find not answers, but better questions, not certainty, but the comfort of shared wonder. Rest now, fellow theorist, and dream of the infinite possibilities that dance in shadow, knowing that tomorrow's dawn will bring new mysteries to unravel and new truths to discover in the endless night of Gotham City.